I'm a 23-year-old woman who lives with my family in my grandparents' house outside the city. Dad works far away, and Mom enjoyed having her folks around to help with me. Sadly, Mom died of cancer 12 years ago. Dad had to keep working, so I stayed with my grandparents. He always makes time for me when he's home. I miss Mom a lot, but overall, life's been okay. When Dad was home, he'd stay in their old room, or we'd go on trips together. Sadly, my grandparents passed away in the last few years. Mom was an only child, and so am I. Her life insurance went to Dad, who used it to fix up the house. They never made them pay rent. It's a bit messy, sorry. Anyway, I'm the only one in my grandma's will, so I got the money, the house, and Grandpa's truck. Dad started dating a few years after Mom died. He never brought anyone home until now. She's young and pretty, with 2 little kids. Dad talked to me about it and asked if they could move in. Since we have plenty of space, I said yes. It's been about 6 months, and now she's pregnant. Dad proposed to her, and I'm happy for him. He's a great dad. But he's not great at talking things out. My soon-to-be stepmom has started pressuring me to move out because they'll need my room for the baby. I think she wants her mom to move in and help out. Dad never mentioned that the house is actually mine. So when he came home last weekend, we had a serious talk. The stepkids have been staying in my grandparents' old room. I have my own room with a big closet and bathroom that Dad added, and he has another big room with a bathroom. She suggested I move to the city to finish school and offered me her apartment at a reduced rate. I waited for Dad to tell her the truth, but he didn't, so I did. I explained that the house is mine and I won't give up my room. I also mentioned that Dad has plenty of savings and could buy them a house, especially if they sold her apartment and used it for a down payment. Now she's upset with me for suggesting Dad use his retirement money, and she doesn't want to sell her apartment because she thinks the market will keep going up and wants to build equity. I made it clear that they should move out before the baby arrives. Am I being unreasonable? Well, tough luck. If you're going to be with a much younger woman, be prepared to support your future children and all that comes with it, instead of trying to save for retirement. It seems like his new partner might have thought he was older and richer, hoping to get more from him, but that idea fell apart when she realized he didn't own the house. It's pretty audacious to ask you to leave but then offer her old place at a discount. So no, OP, you're not in the wrong here. Wow, your dad's really chosen someone special. Even without knowing the house was yours, trying to kick you out to make room for her baby, probably without even talking to your dad first, is pretty thoughtless. It's also pretty unreasonable to expect him to buy a house but not be willing to sell her place to help out. And if he can't stand up to her about it, he's in for a tough time. But that's not your problem. Your dad's a grown-up who's responsible for his own choices. You didn't leave them with no options. She wanted a place without you, and now she can have it. Problem solved. They could make some compromises and find a good living situation. Your stepmom and dad are trying to push you out of your own home, where you've let them and the kids stay for free. It might be a good idea to talk to a lawyer soon. Getting rid of them legally might be tougher than you think. In many places, someone who's been staying with you can become a legal tenant, even if they haven't been paying rent. Story 2. I'm a 30-year-old woman with a young daughter named Lily. My brother James, 32, recently got married to Brittany, who's 26. Before they got together, I knew Brittany casually, but we weren't close. James and I, however, are really tight. When James proposed to Brittany and they started planning the wedding, they made it clear that Lily and I would be involved. They even said Lily would be a flower girl and I would be the maid of honor. But a few weeks before the wedding, Brittany came to talk to me. She said her family had concerns about having kids at the ceremony, so they decided to make it adults only. However, Lily was still invited to the reception. So I said something like, "Sure, it's your big day. I'll do whatever James wants." Then came the rehearsal. Everything was going smoothly until Brittany's 3 young nieces trotted in as junior bridesmaids. I was puzzled and a bit irritated, but I brushed it off. Later, James took me aside and confessed that Brittany was worried Lily might cause a scene and ruin the wedding, hence the fib about it being child-free. I was hurt and upset that they thought that about my daughter, but I kept my cool. I had already made arrangements for a friend to look after Lily during the ceremony and join us later for the reception. James acknowledged my feelings and disagreed with Lily not being invited. On the wedding day, Brittany asked why Lily wasn't there while we were getting ready. I explained she was with a friend and would join us later. Brittany insisted on calling to bring Lily for the photos. Fearing people would wonder why she was missing, and it would reflect poorly on her. I told her she could call, but my friend was aware of the plan and wouldn't come until I asked her to. Brittany called James, hoping he'd persuade me to change my mind, but he understood the arrangement and didn't see any issue with it. She then asked what to say if people noticed Lily's absence in the photos. I suggested she explain that Lily wasn't invited due to concerns about tantrums. That didn't sit well with her, and she called me a name and accused me of being too sensitive. The rest of the wedding was uncomfortable, to say the least, with other drama going on within the party unrelated to our situation. James shared the wedding photos with our family group chats, and now extended family members are asking why Lily isn't in any of them. I've explained what happened, and while my mom supports me, my aunts and uncles think I overreacted. Do you think I'm the one at fault here? What a mess. But honestly, I don't think I am. Why should your daughter be in the pictures if she wasn't invited? But I'm curious, why is your family so worried about her having a tantrum? Is this something that happens often? No, tantrums aren't typical for her. It's really out of character. Originally, I was just a bridesmaid, but some drama led Brittany to make me the maid of honor. The bride and groom made it clear it was their decision who was invited. Lying to you about it was really unfair. They don't have an excuse there. They're trying to make it seem like kids were welcome when Lily was actually excluded. It's their big day, and that should be respected, but it doesn't mean using your daughter for photos or misleading the family about her being invited. Exactly, Brittany got what she wanted. Lily wasn't at the ceremony but was at the reception. Sometimes we need to be careful what we wish for. The photos tell the story perfectly, and when people ask, make sure to mention how Brittany lied about the wedding being child-free. Story 3. I'm a 25-year-old woman married to my 27-year-old husband, and I've been hearing nonstop about this from my in-laws. My husband has a younger sister, Alice, who's 22, and in my opinion, she can be quite difficult. Alice had some health issues as a child, but she managed to overcome them. However, her parents were extremely lenient with her, to the point where she couldn't be corrected without it turning into a big deal. She's lost several jobs because of this, and she doesn't have many friends. She always needs to be the center of attention. So on my other sister-in-law's birthday, their parents bought Alice a gift just to avoid her getting jealous. As for me, I'm an only child, and my best friend, Marie, is like a sister to me. We've been inseparable since 3rd grade, bonding instantly because we were both only children. We're fiercely protective of each other. When my husband and I decided to have a summer wedding, I was surprised to see Alice show up wearing a lacy white dress. I might have believed you if you said she ordered it from a wedding catalog. Between the ceremony and the main reception, there was a cocktail hour. I started getting annoyed because so many people kept asking me about Alice. They mistook her for my husband's ex instead of his sister. I could see that Marie was getting upset too. She walked over to my husband's family and gave them a piece of her mind. On her way back, she tripped and spilled her glass of red wine near Alice. Alice dashed to the bathroom, followed by my mother-in-law, while my father-in-law came over demanding that Marie leave. I refused, explaining that Marie is a lightweight and it was just an accident. My husband supported me, pointing out that Marie's slim build means she can't handle as much alcohol, but we promised to make sure she sobered up before the reception. At the reception, Alice looked stunning in a beautiful green dress, and Marie miraculously felt better. My in-laws haven't stopped talking about the incident, but I find it hard to feel guilty, even though I know it wasn't an accident. You're definitely not in the wrong, and your best friend is amazing. That's true friendship. Don't let your in-laws make you feel bad or guilty. They need to stop coddling Alice and move on from this childish behavior. Maybe it's time to have a frank conversation with them and tell them to grow up. It's great that your husband stood by you. Another approach could have been for him to talk to his sister directly and tell her she needs to change her behavior. I get why he might hesitate, but standing up to his family would show his wife that he's got her back and they're a team. He probably didn't want his wedding day to turn into a scene with his sister throwing a fit in front of everyone. Your in-laws might have enabled her behavior, and your friend was just trying to fix the white dress situation. It's common knowledge not to wear white to a wedding. And since Alice had a backup dress, what's the big deal? And if she ever finds someone to marry her, just wait for the chance to accidentally announce your pregnancy at her wedding. It seems like some people just can't stand to see others shine. My sister-in-law is quite the character. I once saw her shed tears because she didn't get a turkey leg at Thanksgiving dinner when she was just 20. Now, as I'm preparing for my own wedding in 3 months, I've sent out the invitations with clear instructions. Avoid wearing white, for obvious reasons, and stick to emerald green for the bridesmaids' dresses. I've also requested RSVPs by a certain date, as the reception dinner is quite pricey and I don't want to pay for no-shows. Other than that, guests can wear whatever they like. Kids and families are welcome, and I'm not too fussed about attire, except for those specific colors. Just to give you some background, my sister-in-law is my fiance's sister. While we're not super close, we have an okay relationship, we don't hate each other, and we get along fine. During my fiance's birthday bash, some friends and I got to talking about the wedding plans. They remarked on how laid back I seemed about the rules and how refreshing it was not to feel like they were walking on eggshells. I explained that I just wanted everyone to have a good time, so I didn't want to impose too many restrictions. Later, the girlfriend of one of my fiance's friends showed me the dress she was considering for our wedding and asked for my opinion on whether it was appropriate or did she steal the spotlight. It was a bold yellow number, but I genuinely liked it and encouraged her to wear it. I assured her that as the bride, it's not easy to outshine me, and even if someone did, it wouldn't bother me too much. I didn't mean any harm by it, but my sister-in-law took offense and called me pretentious. She was upset because she had strict rules at her own wedding, like no kids and a strict dress code, and we followed them without complaint. I never meant to upset her. I was simply explaining my own wedding plans and the reasoning behind them. But she accused me of subtly undermining her and called me a snake, insisting that if I had something to say, I should say it to her face. Then she stormed out with her husband. My mother-in-law agreed that my sister-in-law overreacted, but she also said I shouldn't have flaunted my laid-back approach, as it may have made her feel bad about her own wedding choices. However, my fiancé and I didn't do anything wrong, and eventually my sister-in-law will have to move on. Am I in the wrong here? Definitely not. It seems like she's internalizing her own issues and projecting them onto me. She might also be jealous that I'm taking a more relaxed approach to my wedding planning. I won't apologize to her. She's the one being dramatic. It's like the saying goes, some people think the world revolves around them, but in this case, it's my sister-in-law. I can't control how she reacts or make her see that it's not about her. On a lighter note, it's quite impressive how she managed to keep her bridezilla tendencies even when it's someone else's wedding. Maybe her strict wedding rules were meant to prevent someone else from stealing her thunder. But in the end, it's my day, and I'm going to do it my way. Thank you for the congratulations, and I'm looking forward to a fantastic wedding. We had a new colleague, Christina, join our team, a friendly woman in her late 30s who's married with kids. We had several chats before becoming close. But one day, while she was sitting, her cleavage became more noticeable. The office atmosphere grew awkward, and some of the guys started avoiding eye contact. It was a minor issue, but it kept happening. A couple of my male coworkers confided in me about feeling uncomfortable with Christina's attire. Being more of a tomboy, they felt at ease discussing it with me. They mentioned feeling uneasy encountering a similar situation to the one I described. I couldn't help but notice that all of Christina's tops seemed designed to show cleavage. The next day, I casually mentioned to her how her cleavage was on display. She didn't respond, just nodded. So I decided to ask Christina if she intentionally chose clothes that accentuated her cleavage. She seemed offended and asked if there was a problem. I expressed that it made me feel uncomfortable if that was the case, especially in a professional setting with male colleagues around. She became upset and questioned why it was any of my business what she wore. I clarified that she could wear whatever she wanted, but some colleagues felt uneasy being exposed to such attire at work. She retorted that it wasn't my business and suggested that those who had issues with her clothing should confront her directly instead of hiding behind me. We argued, and while some female coworkers agreed with me, they also mentioned that I could have worded my concerns more tactfully. Christina started avoiding some of us, which seemed unprofessional since part of our job involves interacting with each other. When I tried to approach her to discuss the situation, it led to another argument. She threatened to involve the administrators if I persisted, but my intention was simply to address the issue and find a resolution. Do you think I overstepped by saying that to her? Those male colleagues must be thrilled with your behavior, huh? You're trying to set yourself apart from other women to gain their approval, aren't you? But let's be clear, her cleavage is none of your concern, okay? It's her choice how she dresses. What you and the guys are doing is body shaming. If I were her, I'd take this to HR. If the men are uncomfortable, maybe they need a reminder about self-control. Shame on you for getting involved. You're definitely in the wrong here. Being a woman doesn't give you the right to dictate how your coworkers dress. You're not her boss, and you're not enforcing a dress code violation. You're just trying to impose your own standards on her. Whether she's married with kids or not is irrelevant. Focus on your own work, and if coworkers try to gossip, keep it to yourself.
The president of the company where my husband works turned out to be my uncle. We invited the president to our wedding, and I reunited with my uncle after a long time. I wondered what kind of person Tyler had chosen, but you're nothing special, are you? You don't even come close to my charm. But I decided not to mind that. My name is Kristen. I will soon be 31 years old. I graduated from university and worked for a food manufacturer. I have always loved cooking and was fulfilled working in a field I enjoyed. When I was 25, I met Tyler, who would become my husband, at a local eatery I frequented. I loved the taste of this restaurant and visited 3 times a week. Tyler was there alone and seemed new to the restaurant, unsure of what to order. Seeing him like that, I spontaneously recommended a dish to him. The recommendation is the rolled omelet. Surprised by being suddenly spoken to, Tyler looked shocked but then smiled and thanked me. At that moment, I felt a spark for him. From that day on, Tyler became a regular at the restaurant. And whenever we met, we dined together. After discovering we were the same age, we started talking informally. Want to share this salad? One day, Tyler surprised me by suggesting we share food from the same plate. Something we hadn't done before even while dining together. Tyler, do you say that to everyone? Your girlfriend will get mad. Embarrassed, I overreacted, but then Tyler looked at me seriously. I don't have any, so will you be my girlfriend? Thus, after about a year of meeting, we started dating. We usually had a date at my house because he wanted to eat my cooking. Having a home date and eating my girlfriend's cooking is the best. Tyler would say, filling his mouth with food. I cooked a lot for him, and I loved seeing him happily clearing the plates one after another. I learned after we started dating that Tyler was quite a big eater. He had been eating modestly at the restaurant because it cost money. Honestly, Kristen's cooking is the best in the world. I want you to cook for me every day when we get married. Tyler was the kind of person who would say such things without any embarrassment. Although I tried not to take his words too seriously, I naturally started thinking about marriage. He was the same age as me but had a cute and caring nature that made me want to look after him. That's why, when I was with him, I naturally took on a more responsible role. However, there was no sign of a proposal from Tyler, and before I knew it, 2 years had passed. Impatient, I asked him, "What do you think about marriage?" After a moment of thought, he said, "Being with you feels so natural, I hadn't really thought about it. We're pretty much like a married couple already." Furthermore, Tyler said that he would be okay with a de facto marriage without registration. However, I had dreamed of getting married and sharing Tyler's last name. When I expressed this, he said, "Then, let's get married." Thus, we registered our marriage and became husband and wife. Although he had been okay with just living together, I was glad we got married. Seeing my name written with Tyler's last name on mail and being called at places like hospitals made me feel happy and constantly reminded me that I was married to him. Above all, I was truly happy to be with him every day, not just on weekends. After getting married, I cooked passionately for every meal. Because he enjoyed eating so much, there really was a joy in cooking for him. In the midst of this, we were preparing for our wedding ceremony. I won't invite the company president, but you will, right? Tyler's colleagues who had married had all invited the president. And surprisingly, the president's wife was also attending. Even the president's wife attends, huh? While thinking this, I continued preparing for the ceremony. The preparation for the wedding was more challenging than I thought. And I was quite overwhelmed. During this time, Tyler's response to anything I asked was always the same. Kristen, you can decide everything. And invariably, he would add, because whatever you decide is what I want to do. However, these words were not at all pleasing to me. Maybe because he wasn't focused on marriage. He had absolutely no interest in the wedding ceremony. We would have a wedding ceremony just because I wanted to. But he didn't help with the preparations at all. Losing patience, I said. At least let's choose the menu together. Since Tyler loved eating, I thought he would enjoy deciding on the menu with me. However, he grimaced and said, "It's best to let the people at the venue decide that." While a certain menu was already set, there were choices to be made. And I wanted to enjoy making those decisions together. My feelings didn't reach him, and I ended up preparing for the wedding mostly alone. Tyler's indifferent attitude made me feel a bit lonely. However, he wasn't saying he didn't want to do it, so I somehow managed to shift my mood. And then, the day of the wedding arrived. "You look absolutely beautiful, Kristen," Tyler said with a full smile to me in my wedding dress. With those words, all the memories of preparing almost alone for the wedding ceremony just faded away. The ceremony proceeded smoothly, and the guests made their way to the main seats. Then, Tyler's company president and his wife arrived. "Hi. Long time no see. Thank you for coming today." Tyler seemed flustered by my words. "Hey, Kristen. This is my company's president, you know." The president's wife, standing next to him, also looked puzzled by my words. I had no idea it was Kristen's wedding. The president, slightly tipsy from the drinks, laughed out loud. He called me by my first name, and Tyler was taken aback. "Tyler, you really didn't pay attention to the wedding details, did you? The president of your company is my uncle. When I was making the guest list at my parents' house, my father saw the list and said, 'Tyler works at my brother's company?' Turns out, Tyler worked for the company managed by my uncle, my father's brother. I had been close to my uncle when I was little. But I hadn't seen him much since becoming an adult. Of course, I had told Tyler about this. However, he seemed to have forgotten since he hadn't paid much attention to the wedding details. 'Tyler, please take good care of my precious niece. I will do my best even more now.'" Tyler straightened up as he said this to my uncle, which was somewhat amusing. The three of us were having a lively conversation. When the president's wife loudly cleared her throat to make her presence felt. "So Tyler's bride is a relative of my husband? Well, that makes us practically family." While saying this, the president's wife looked me over as if sizing me up. So, I instinctively thought, I might not get along with this type. However, I smiled and said, "We look forward to getting along with both of you." She then proudly stated, "Tyler is a rough diamond I discovered." According to her, she had vigorously persuaded my uncle to hire Tyler after his interview. Tyler had a good background, and with her assistance, my uncle had decided to hire him. I felt a bit of an edge in her words, but neither my uncle nor Tyler seemed to care. Because Tyler is working in my company, I got to meet Kristen after such a long time. Anyway, congratulations. Saying this, the president cheerfully returned to his seat. However, his wife lingered, leaned close to me, and whispered. I wondered what kind of person Tyler had chosen, but you're really nothing special, are you? You don't even come close to my charm. With that, she smugly returned to her seat. I was momentarily stunned, unable to comprehend what had just been said. However, I realized she was trying to assert dominance over me. But at that moment, I didn't understand why she would do that. Her remarks were briefly troubling. But I was soon surrounded by many friends and enjoyed a happy time. However, as we said goodbye to the guests, she made another insinuating remark. That food was delicious. Of course, it was Tyler's choice, right? She spoke as if I weren't there, only addressing Tyler. Then, she continued. Tyler always enjoys his food so much, so his taste in food must be excellent. Hearing this, I thought, the president's wife really likes Tyler. That's why she came at me about not being alluring. I silently listened to how he would respond. Then, he said, of course, I chose it. Wasn't it the best? I was irritated by his self-satisfied comment. What do you mean you chose it? You didn't even look at the menu. Though I was upset internally, I didn't show that in my voice or demeanor. Then, the president's wife said, I knew it. I understand everything about Tyler. I was put off by her flirtatious behavior. She left the venue without even glancing at me. When we got home, exhausted, we collapsed on the sofa. I thought weddings were a hassle, but it turned out to be fun. I couldn't resist a jab. It was all thanks to my preparations. And yet, you said such things in front of the president's wife. It seems she really likes you. I pointed out that Tyler had lied about selecting the menu himself. Startled, he responded, I had to. I need to maintain good relations, after all. From Tyler's words, I realized he was aware that she favored him. Well, it was fun, so it's okay. Despite being somewhat annoyed by her actions, I knew I wouldn't have to deal with her much longer. I decided to keep only the happy memories of the day. The wedding went off without a hitch, and we spent a peaceful year together. Around that time, I was busy leading a project at work. Perhaps because of that, Tyler and I began to have more frequent minor disagreements. Don't just leave your dishes there, at least take them to the kitchen. Oh, I was going to do it later. Tyler had been watching TV for quite a while before saying that. He never intended to do that, but whenever I called him out, he started saying, I was planning to do that. Since I became a leader, I started bringing work home. The honeymoon phase was long gone. So we stopped having conversations even while eating together. He used to eat anything I cooked and would say it was delicious. But now, he no longer comments on my cooking, nor does he express any gratitude for the meal. Furthermore, Tyler was always looking at his phone during meals. I had warned him several times, but since he didn't change, I got tired of mentioning that. Then, one day, I came home late from work. I had prepared dinner in the morning, so it was ready to eat after just warming and mixing in the microwave. I had sent Tyler a message about that. However, when I got home, he was lying down watching TV. And on the table, there were scattered empty food containers from the store. Seeing this scene after coming home tired, I felt at my limit. Didn't you see the message I sent? Didn't you look at it? I became stern without being able to stop myself. I saw it. I didn't quite understand it, so I bought something to eat. Tyler said this without even looking at me. I wanted to yell, how could you not understand that explanation, but I held back and said, at least clean up after yourself when you eat. Of course, his reply was this. Oh, I was going to do it later. At these words, I ironically became calm and said, okay, then do it later. And I went to take a bath and went straight to bed. The next morning, the table was still as it was last night. But I no longer had the energy to nag Tyler. I cleaned up the table and headed to work on my day off. As my work progressed well and I felt fulfilled, I couldn't manage household duties like before. Even so, Tyler never took the initiative to help. I had asked him several times to cook or do laundry, but of course, he had never done that. When I pointed this out, I always ended up hearing the usual, "Oh, I was going to do it later." I had grown to dislike these words and decided to stop expecting anything from him. Gradually, he began to eat out more. But that was fine. I was tired of coming home to see scattered empty food containers. This lifestyle continued for about half a year, and I turned 30. I came home tired that day, having completely forgotten it was my birthday. Surprisingly, the room was dark, and I thought Tyler might already be asleep. As I was about to turn on the living room light, a loud noise suddenly erupted. I closed my eyes in surprise. Then, cautiously opening my eyes, I saw Tyler standing with crackers. There was a cake with 30 candles on the table. "Kristen, happy birthday." I was too surprised to speak. We've been missing each other lately. I've reflected on that. Tyler cared about our strained relationship and wanted to improve it, starting with my birthday. Hearing his feelings, I reflected too. Sorry for being so busy with work and not having much time. Thus, we reconciled and celebrated my birthday joyfully. It felt like we were back to the old days, and it was truly fun. From that day, I tried to finish work as early as possible. I also reflected on not being able to face Tyler because I was too caught up in work. So, I tried not to take on too much work and asked others for help to create some breathing room. As a result, I naturally felt lighter and was able to be kinder to Tyler. Our conversations increased, and the home felt brighter. However, this happiness didn't last long. A few months after my birthday, Tyler had reverted to doing nothing again. Thinking this couldn't go on, I decided to cook a lot of his favorite dishes. "I made all your favorites today, and I even bought some nice alcohol." I actively tried to engage Tyler. However, he coldly said, "I'm not in my 20s anymore, I don't eat this stuff anymore." Saying this, he threw all the food I had prepared into the trash. I was too shocked to say anything. Tyler had been drinking quite a bit while I was cooking. Even though he was drunk, I couldn't forgive this appalling behavior. The next morning, when the alcohol had worn off, I showed him a photo. "What? Don't show me pictures of such ugly food." He sighed heavily and looked away from the photo. I struggled to hold back my tears. "Don't you remember because you were drunk? You threw away all the food I made." I had taken photos of the discarded food. However, he sighed even more deeply and said, "Maybe it's impossible for us to get along, isn't it?" Saying this, Tyler went out somewhere. I was left with a gaping hole in my heart as I headed to the office. I had a business trip to the neighboring town that day. There was an important presentation, so I decided to forget about Tyler for the moment. After successfully completing the meeting, I returned home earlier than planned. When I opened the front door, I saw unfamiliar women's shoes. Tyler's shoes were there too, so I was certain he had brought a woman home. As I had become busier, I had started writing my schedule on the whiteboard on the fridge. It seemed Tyler had seen this and let his guard down, thinking I wouldn't be home yet. I activated my camera to take evidence of the affair and held my breath. Peeking into the living room, I saw the company president's wife Gina and Tyler engaged in a certain act. Gross. It was a sight I wanted to look away from. But I continued recording until the conversation was over. Once I had enough evidence on video, I left the house. Then, I headed straight to a cafe. I started up the laptop I had brought with me and edited the video I had just shot. Then, I sent the video to a certain place. Later, I returned home at the scheduled time. Of course, Gina was no longer there, and Tyler was lying down watching TV. Imagining the scene I had just witnessed and what would happen to him next almost made me laugh. However, I maintained my composure and carried on with life as usual. The next morning, after Tyler went to work, I followed him out of the house. That evening, when I returned home, he was sitting in the living room with a gloomy expression. "What's wrong?" I asked him, knowing full well why he was upset. "Calm down and listen. It seems like there's a hidden camera in the house." I was shocked by his statement, and seeing my reaction, he continued. "But I can't find the camera anywhere." Looking around, there were signs that the house had been searched. Tyler had been desperately searching for the hidden camera. What exactly was recorded? I asked Tyler, and he fell silent. It was understandable. Embarrassing footage of him had been captured. Then, the doorbell rang, and Tyler answered it. "President, and the president's wife. Why are you here?" I smiled mischievously and said, "Now, all the main characters are here." Gina had an expression that suggested she had already seen the video. However, the president, my uncle, seemed not to have seen it yet and was struggling to grasp the situation. In fact, I had called Tyler's company, asking the president and his wife to come to the house. "Shall we watch this now?" I displayed the video on my laptop. It showed Tyler and Gina playing a real-life house game. "Gina, is dinner ready yet?" "Tyler, you're so cute." While saying this, Gina brought the food from the kitchen. She cooled a hot hamburger steak with her mouth before feeding it to Tyler. Gina's cooking is the best. I'm tired of Kristen's cooking. Oh, don't mention that plain Jane. I'm 68, but I'm still hotter than she is. While saying this, Tyler and Gina cuddled up together. I paused the video there. Unfortunately, there's no hidden camera anywhere. I was the one watching and recording. Tyler, the president, and Gina seemed lost for words. Then, I pressed the play button again. A slideshow started. It showed Tyler throwing away my food, lying on the sofa watching TV, and exchanging loving messages with Gina. Then I said to my uncle, "It seems you haven't seen it yet. But I sent this video anonymously to the company's inquiry email. I had requested that they not inform the president yet. And it seemed they had honored that request." My uncle was visibly disappointed, realizing his wife and his employee were in an inappropriate relationship. Gina was desperately trying to explain herself when I said, "The following is unreleased footage." I pressed the play button. Then, Tyler and Gina appeared again on screen. Did the birthday cake plan work? Just like you said, Gina, she fell for it. She got all happy just because I celebrated her birthday. Then, the two of them burst out laughing. Essentially, Tyler celebrating my birthday was a strategy proposed by her, so that I wouldn't suspect his infidelity. Finally, the president, who had been silent, spoke with a trembling voice. "What were you two thinking? Hurting my dear niece? Cheating behind my back, don't think you'll be forgiven." Then, Gina, with tears streaming down her face, said, "It's not like that." Tyler came on to me. "There's no way I would be with such a young guy. This video must be fabricated by this woman." Next, Tyler raised his voice. "Don't joke with me. Who would seriously be with an old lady like you? I was just being nice because you're the president's wife." Tyler and Gina began to blame each other. "I was just being nice to get money from her. That's not the real me in those videos, it was all for money." Tyler said that he had been receiving large amounts of money every time he met with Gina. He considered it like a part-time job being with her. Nobody's going to believe that. I coldly pushed away Tyler, who was clinging to me. Tyler had been cold to me, having an affair with the president's wife. That fact wouldn't change, and above all, this video was proof. Gina, of course we're getting divorced. Pack your things right now and get out of my sight. No. Why has it come to this? I coldly said to her, who was crying. This is what happens when you do such things. I played the video again. That's when Tyler smashed the computer. This destroys the evidence. He seemed triumphant, thinking he was safe since the data was gone. But the president sternly told him, "What are you talking about? The data still exists, and what you've done will never disappear." Tyler seemed to have completely forgotten that the video had been sent to the company's email. Realizing this, his face turned red, and he said, "Later, send everyone in the company an email saying it was all a lie." With a broad smile, I replied, "Oh, I was planning to do that later, but now I can't because the computer is broken." Of course, even if the computer had been available, I had no intention of doing such a thing. I simply returned to Tyler the same words he always used on me. Thus, the affair between Tyler and the president's wife became known throughout the company. The president eventually divorced his wife after a lawsuit, as she continued to refuse the divorce. Tyler was fired from the company. I later learned that Tyler, who was hired at the insistence of Gina, was completely incompetent at his job. There had been numerous complaints from other employees about his work. However, everything had been covered up by her. And she had hired Tyler because he was to her liking. At first, she was content just watching, but she initiated more after disliking that he married me. The timing coincided with a troubled period in our marriage, and Tyler, tempted by the large sums of money, ended up having an affair with her. Tyler refused to divorce me. I was just being exploited because of my position. I have no feelings for Gina. So it doesn't count as cheating, he claimed. Thinking this was absurd, I decided to leave the rest to my lawyer. Although it took time, I was eventually able to get a divorce. Abandoned by the president, the two of them decided to live together. But to him, Gina just looked like an ordinary old woman, who was no longer the president's wife. Bothered by her aging odor, he couldn't stand to live with her and left the house. She was left completely devastated and lived alone. Tyler got re-employed but kept getting fired because he was incompetent. The computer was company property, so I made sure he paid compensation for it. On my end, I steadily climbed the career ladder, and my salary increased significantly. Although the workload and responsibilities increased, I genuinely enjoy my work. I regretted sending the video to my uncle's company initially. But instead, I was thanked by my uncle. The divorce allowed him to rid himself of his extravagant spending wife and fire Tyler, who was unpopular among other employees. Since then, the company atmosphere has improved, and the business has been thriving. I plan to continue enjoying my favorite cooking and living a bright life.
Get out with your kids, old hag. The lover was standing in front of me, holding a 1-year-old child she had hidden away. I was dumbfounded by her condescending tone, but I replied, "Fine. Here's the divorce papers. But I'm leaving the 3 kids behind." "What? You take care of them. They are your kids, after all." "That's right, fulfill your responsibilities as a mother." Even my husband started to berate me. Frustrated by their selfish remarks, I inadvertently let out a deep sigh and said, "You're joking, right? Because these kids are What? My words seemed to have caught them off guard. Now, it was my husband and his lover who stood with their mouths agape, staring at me in shock. Then, they made a foolish decision. Watching their shallow judgment, I sighed softly to myself. They didn't understand the gravity of the situation at all. Pitying them, I decided to contact someone. My name is Kate, and I'm 40 years old. Currently, I work from home and am actively seeking a spouse. I have devoted myself to my job since childhood to achieve my dreams. However, upon turning 40, I noticed that most of my friends were already married with children. Is this really okay? Once I started thinking about it, I couldn't stop. One day, I vented my frustrations mixed with sighs to a visitor at my home. The visitor, a work acquaintance and close friend who knew my personality well, replied with a wry smile. Well, I can't say for sure, but getting married might open up a new world for you. The acquaintance was a work-related contact, but our long association had evolved into a sort of friendship, and she knew my personality well. Her casual remark made me pause in realization. Maybe it will open up a new world. Those words were intriguing to me because of my profession. Of course, I didn't take marriage lightly. I've heard plenty of complaints from married friends, and encountered negative information about marriage daily through articles and television. Yet, my curiosity became uncontrollable, and that very day, I registered on several dating apps. Though it may seem frivolous, I've always lived by following my inquisitive nature and applying it to my work. This time, too, I acted on impulse. Little did I know what the future held. Among the messages I received on the dating app, one from a man named Ben Thompson, a 45-year-old employee, stood out. His messages were very polite, and I quickly took a liking to him. We shared hobbies, and our conversation flourished around books. As we continued to exchange messages, and just when I felt things were going well, Ben invited me to meet for a meal. I promptly agreed. That weekend, we had our lunch date. Ben was just as calm and composed as his messages had suggested. His gentle manner and kind demeanor made me wonder why such a wonderful man had been single until now. Curious, I asked him, and he replied with a slight, apologetic smile. Actually, I was once married and got a bit burned by the experience. Plus, work kept me so busy that I just got older without realizing it. Indeed, Ben was divorced, a fact noted on his profile page. Despite this, something about his photo had caught my eye, perhaps it was intuition. After comparing many other men's profiles, none attracted me as much as Ben. Meeting him confirmed my instincts were right. I strongly felt I wanted to date Ben. Our meal was delightful, and we quickly made plans for another date. 2 months later, Ben proposed to me. I was thrilled and agreed to marry him quickly. While I wondered about the speed of our engagement, I rationalized that at our age, there was no point in delaying. Given our ages, I'm not too fussy about having a wedding ceremony. If that's what you want, I have no objections. Overcome by embarrassment, I almost skipped the wedding preparations and decided to move in with Ben immediately. I wanted to start our married life as soon as possible. Thus, I quickly handled all the necessary procedures and moved into Ben's house. But before that, Ben and I had this conversation. Sorry, but could you handle this while you're running your errands? He handed me a marriage registration form, already signed by him as the applicant and guarantor. Understood. I'll submit it later. I took the documents, but with all the moving and paperwork, I forgot to submit them. As I planned to do it later, sudden work emergencies piled up. And I completely forgot about it until after I had moved into his house. Realizing this, I thought to myself, I must not forget to submit it later as I walked into his house. That's when something unbelievable happened. For the first time, I discovered that Ben had children. During the 2 months we dated, I had never been invited to his house. At the time, I thought nothing of it, but now it seemed there was a reason. And it was a bit of a shock. As I stood there dazed, Ben suddenly spoke in a stern voice. "Ah, yes. From now on, you'll also be taking care of the kids. Don't slack off." His tone had changed from before as he ordered me around. As I exclaimed, "What?" 3 young boys came bustling out from the back of the house. "Huh, so this is the new mom? What? No way, she's just the maid, right? Come on, Alex, that's harsh to say right off the bat to someone you just met." The 3 of them stared rudely at me and burst out laughing noisily. As I stood there, taken aback, Ben cleared his throat loudly. "Hey, cut it out, all of you." Upon his stern reprimand, the 3 boys chorused a belated okay. "These are my sons." From oldest to youngest, Chris is 18, Alex is 17, and Justin is 16. All are in high school, and Chris is a college applicant. Make sure you take good care of them. Saying this, Ben mentioned he was going to take a bath and left the room. I stood there for a while, dumbfounded, staring at the 3 boys. Then, they began to sneer and make belittling remarks again. "What's with that stupid look, old hag? Yeah, don't just stand there. We're hungry. Hurry up and get dinner ready, maid." With that, they each retreated to their rooms. I was left alone at the entrance, standing in disbelief. So much had happened all at once, and I couldn't keep up. I had been busy all day and was utterly exhausted. Glancing at my watch, I saw it was now 7 p.m. I finally entered the house and headed for the kitchen. Though told to make dinner without any guidance. It was my first time here and I didn't know where anything was. Sighing, I peeked inside the refrigerator only to find a few drinks and some condiments. How was I supposed to prepare a meal with this? Then, Ben, fresh from his bath, saw me standing lost in the kitchen and clicked his tongue in irritation. "You're slow. Never mind, I'll order takeout for today. Don't bother cooking." "I'm sorry." As I apologized, hanging my head, he clicked his tongue loudly again and snapped. "Make sure you do your job properly tomorrow." He then stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind him. His cold demeanor left me wanting to cry and also filled me with a strong sense of suspicion. Silently, I began to formulate a plan. That day, although Ben mentioned he'd order takeout, he only ordered for himself and his sons, not for me. The 4 of them sat around the dining table, enjoying their hamburgers, while I could only watch from the kitchen corner. Noticing my gaze, Ben spitefully remarked, "That's your punishment for not making dinner. Go eat some ready-made food from the store." Hearing this, I bowed my head and left the house. There was a convenience store nearby, I remembered as I trudged off to buy my dinner. When I returned with my ready-made meal, Ben and his sons had already finished their dinner and returned to their rooms. The remains of their takeout hamburgers were left untouched on the kitchen table. I sighed as I cleaned up and ate my bland dinner alone. I hadn't expected such treatment on my first day. Perhaps this marriage was a mistake. Despite wanting to flee, I reconsidered. My married life had just begun. Maybe if we lived together long enough, we could become a real family. With this hopeful thought, I decided to try harder starting tomorrow. However, such resolutions were quickly shattered. The 3 sons were all selfish, treating me more like a servant than family. "Hey, where's my gym uniform? I told you to wash it yesterday. You always forget, so useless. And my uniform shirt is still wrinkly, seriously annoying." Saying that, the 3 of them berated me daily and hurled insults. Initially, they refused to let me enter their rooms. Ben's house was fairly large, with many rooms, and each child had their own. When I first came to the house and tried to clean their rooms, the 3 of them found out later and were furious, shouting at me, "Don't just come in here. Yeah, you're so annoying. You didn't take any of our stuff, did you?" Frightened by their accusations, I no longer dared approach their rooms. They would leave their laundry scattered, sometimes forgetting to include items for washing, and then blame me when things were amiss. Unable to endure it any longer, I consulted Ben, but he dismissed me. "I'm busy. Don't bring such trivial issues to me." After moving in, he had dumped all household and child-related responsibilities on me. Suddenly, his overtime and business trips increased, and he was rarely home on weekends. Moreover, both he and his sons seemed to view my home-based work as nothing more than a hobby, openly disparaging it. "How long do you plan to continue with such nonsense?" Whenever I was at my computer, Ben would sneer and sigh exaggeratedly, suggesting I was just playing around. His lack of empathy deeply hurt me. "Please don't speak to me like that. Actually, I'm going to be quite busy with work soon. Could you help out a bit with the household chores?" One day, when I desperately needed time for work, I asked him this. He exploded in anger. "Work? The work you're doing is hardly significant. Focus on getting the housework done perfectly. If you can't manage that, then quit your job." His ferocity left me speechless. I had explained my work to Ben before our marriage, and he had agreed I could continue it. He even promised to share household duties when work got busy. Yet now, he was completely negating his earlier assurances. Feeling deceived, I was left hollow. From then on, I resolved not to discuss work anymore. Until our living situation stabilized, I would focus on the household, thinking that would be best. Besides household chores, there was something else that needed my attention. It was about the 3 kids. On the surface, they seemed like model students, but I soon realized they were quite troubled. At school, they behaved without any issues, but at home, they invited bad company and engaged in problematic behavior. What started as hidden drinking and smoking a few months ago had now become blatant in front of me. They would disguise themselves to go out at night, continuing their habits of smoking and drinking. Concerned by their actions, I rushed to consult Ben, but he chose to believe the children over me. After all, the children committed their misdeeds when Ben was not at home, and he easily believed their side of the story. Then he coldly said to me, "How can you say such demeaning things about your own children? I find your character, willing to falsely accuse them so easily, unbelievable." Ben's outright dismissal left me speechless, and seeing such a father. The children casually joined him in calling me terrible. "Dad, she was slacking off with the housework yesterday too." "Yeah, she seems to have been on the computer all day until we came back. The cleaning isn't done properly either. We can't concentrate on our studies like this." Then my husband scolded me fiercely, being continuously blamed by both my husband and the children. I gradually lost my place in the home. Amidst this, I faced even further misfortune. taking advantage of their father's trust. The sons not only looked down on me but also started pinning their own misdeeds on me. And they reported this to Ben. "Hey, Dad. She was stealing money from your wallet." "What? Is that true? There's no way I would do that." I desperately denied the accusation, but the children, smirking, didn't listen to my explanations. In the end, under the coercion of Ben and the children, I had to pay a substantial amount of money as compensation to avoid further punishment. This was how I was terribly treated by Ben and his 3 sons, enduring in silence. However, my silence was not out of resignation but to bide my time, waiting for the right moment to strike back. Although my feelings for them had nearly vanished, running away from this house would leave a bad taste in many ways. One day, about a year into the marriage, I noticed that among the friends hanging out with the sons, there was one who was always treated like a servant. Whenever he came to our house, he was always sent to the nearby store to buy drinks and snacks. That day, I quietly followed him as he was about to leave the house. "Hey, you don't need to go buy anything. I've got some drinks and snacks prepared for you." When I spoke to him, he seemed relieved and stopped going to the convenience store. He thanked me politely and introduced himself. His name was Fred Johnson. He was a classmate of Justin's since their freshman year of high school. "Things were good at first," Fred said softly. According to him, the boys hadn't always been this way. But their behavior escalated around the time the oldest was preparing for college entrance exams. Eventually, the sons began targeting Fred. He really wanted to stop hanging out with them but couldn't seem to get away. That's why he was relieved when I approached him. A month later, he confided something important to me, and I offered to help him discreetly. While I was dealing with the sons' issues behind the scenes, a change occurred between Ben and me. A month after I started consulting with Fred, a woman suddenly appeared at my doorstep with a baby. She bluntly said to me, "Hello, ma'am. My name is Emma Brown, and this child is Ben's. I'll be straightforward. Could you divorce Ben?" As I stood there stunned by this sudden revelation, she impatiently made a derogatory remark. "Get out with your kids, old hag." Then Ben, who arrived late, agreed with his lover, pressing me to divorce. "I'm sick of living with an old woman like you." I was disgusted by their condescending remarks and replied, "Fine, I'll leave as you say. But I'm leaving the 3 kids behind." "What? You take care of them. They are your kids, after all." "That's right, fulfill your responsibilities as a mother." I let out a deep sigh in response to their selfishness and said, "You're joking, right? Because these kids aren't mine. Besides, I'm not even married to Ben." "What?" My words apparently shocked Ben as he stared at me, his mouth agape. Yes, I never submitted the marriage registration Ben told me to. On the day it was revealed he had hidden his children from me and pretended we were married, I harbored a strong distrust towards him. I decided to see how things would unfold and refrained from registering our marriage. While opinions may vary, I continued to hide this fact and maintained a marital relationship with Ben for a specific purpose. So, I don't need to take care of the kids. I firmly stated this and announced my departure from the house. Initially stunned, Ben soon smirked unpleasantly, and his lover laughed loudly. "What?" Then we're even spared the hassle of a divorce and property division. Watching their shallow reaction, I sighed silently to myself. They foolishly understood nothing of the situation's gravity. While pitying them, I contacted Fred, the friend of the son, to inform him of something important. 2 weeks after I left Ben's house, his lover came to see me, her face distorted with anger. "Hey, you deceitful woman. You knew those kids were terrible troublemakers, didn't you? You wicked woman." She nearly lunged at me as she screamed these accusations. Yes, Ben had told his lover that the children were model students, and she had naively believed him. But in reality, they were far from it. "You knew they only acted like model students in front of Ben, didn't you?" She pressed me, demanding that I take the kids back. But I coldly told her, "This has nothing to do with me. Besides, they're causing even more serious trouble now." At my words, the lover burst into loud sobs. "I can't handle it anymore. Help me." With a sigh, I offered her some advice. "If you dislike it so much, why not just break up with Ben?" "But I don't want that either." She stomped her feet like a petulant child. "You dislike this and that, but that doesn't solve anything." I sighed again, exasperated. I closed the door on the lover who rejected all my suggestions, leaving her crying outside. Eventually, she quieted down. 2 weeks later, a book was released and became an explosive hit. It spread through word of mouth online, drawing significant attention. The story resembled my experiences with my husband and his lover. Indeed, the book was a novel I had written, based on my marriage to Ben. I am a romance novelist with a bit of a reputation in the field. My venture into a gritty drama of love and hate had caused quite a stir for its new style. I used social media to promote it heavily, sparking a major debate. Your new work is being highly praised as a fresh frontier. After some time, the acquaintance who had once told me that marriage might open up a new world came to visit, smiling broadly. Indeed, she was actually the editor responsible for my work. She knew my personality well. So perhaps she had anticipated this turn of events back then. If that was the case, it might seem a bit cunning. But since I went along with it, I couldn't really complain. Well, in a sense, it's like a personal novel, so maybe it's not something to be proud of. As I sighed, my acquaintance smirked and handed me an envelope. I took it with a puzzled look, and she said cheerily, "But it did help someone, right?" Suddenly recalling something, I hastily opened the envelope and pulled out the contents, a letter from Fred Johnson, a former friend of the son's. I quickly read through it and felt a profound sense of accomplishment as I exhaled in relief. The letter explained that Fred had been freed from bullying. Indeed, at the same time my book was released, the criminal activities of the former children had been reported with evidence, thanks to Fred's carefully gathered proofs. This had led to the police detaining the boys. Because of the uproar, Ben also became a topic of gossip in the neighborhood. Many readers pointed out similarities to the novel and speculated online, quickly identifying personal details in today's digital age. It was terrifying how the novel's models were pinpointed to be Ben and his family, causing him to be whispered about by neighbors. Eventually, the boys were sent to a juvenile facility due to the severity of their actions. But their poor attitudes apparently led to them being bullied there. Ben ultimately lost his job due to the scandal spreading to his company, finding himself without a place. When the lover found out Ben was unemployed, she took the child and fled. It turned out her attachment to Ben had been more about his income than love. She was reportedly struggling to raise the child alone, working in a night job. Ben, unable to find regular employment due to the scandal, resorted to day labor. This marriage experience allowed me to write novels from a different perspective. Though it might seem like I used my marriage to gain experience, I reconciled it with myself as acceptable. Though my time with Ben and his children was short, it seemed to have significantly grown me as a person. There might be others who suffer through worse marriages without being able to express their pain. I decided to focus on such people in my future novels. And with this experience, I aim to reach new heights as a writer, continuing to write works influenced by what I've gone through. Having set a new goal, I am now diligently working on a new piece at my computer. This house was sold to the eldest son and his wife. Everyone else, get out now. In the face of unbelievable remarks from my in-laws and John, who are making me pay the mortgage on their home, I realized that they had been with me from the beginning just to make me pay the mortgage. The moment I realized this fact, my feelings changed from gratitude to hatred in an instant. Then, I'll be moving out. Facing their mocking remarks, I answered with a defiant smile. I'll make them regret picking a fight with me, all the way to the depths of hell. I immediately turned to someone for help and began plotting my revenge against the three of them. My name is Gina Kane. I am 48 years old and work at a law firm as a lawyer. Currently, I am supporting my in-laws and my husband while managing our lives. It all started when I gifted a house to my in-laws. John and I got married when I was 30 years old. When our marriage was decided, my father-in-law encountered an unforeseen accident. He injured his leg, making it difficult to stand on his own, and was forced to live in a wheelchair. Concerned about the elder care needed as my mother-in-law is also not young, I gifted my in-laws an accessible home. At first, they were considering living in public housing. But since they would be living midway between our workplaces, I suggested that we could come to help whenever needed. I want to repay the Kane family for all they've done for my father. My father had died before I got married. Just before he passed away, he was burdened with a large debt, and our household finances were in dire straits. To repay debts, I took on more debts, living a hellish life. John and his family saved us from this situation. John and his parents took on the burden of my father's debts. If you're hesitant to marry because of the debt, just pay it back, and it'll be fine, right? That's how our parents feel too. That's right. The company went bankrupt, and you incurred the debts. Not from playing around, so there's no reason not to help. That's right. When times are tough, we should help each other. There's no need to feel guilty or inferior. Saying this, John and his parents silently provided most of the financial aid. My father and I, in tears, expressed our gratitude. And I desperately took the lawyer's exam. The amount borrowed from John and his parents totaled just under $50,000. Once I became a lawyer and earned money, I could definitely repay it during my lifetime. I hated the idea of remaining indebted for financial support. I absolutely had to pass the exam and become a lawyer. With this determination, I worked tirelessly. Thanks to my efforts, I passed the lawyer exam on my first attempt. Naturally, I received congratulations from my in-laws as well. I immediately found employment and began working at a law firm. The director was a kind person, and the office had skilled lawyers in its ranks. I quickly improved under the guidance of my senior colleagues. Eventually, I met clients who contracted with me exclusively. And now I am a female lawyer with an annual income exceeding $100,000, serving as a figurehead for the office. As my work began to stabilize, I completely repaid the debts to my parents. My father, thinking he had no more regrets in this world, followed my mother, who had passed away earlier. After my parents passed away and I was left alone, John proposed marriage to me. You are a strong woman who can live on your own, but I want to be a man who can support you. I will continue to cherish you, so won't you marry me? Thus, our marriage was decided, and I thought a smooth sailing life would begin. However, just then, my father-in-law encountered an accident. Owing to the significant favor I had received in the past, I insisted against the hesitations of my in-laws and offered to build a new barrier-free house. The gratitude I feel towards your parents is not enough, even with this. So, please don't hesitate. I want you to live a life without any inconveniences. It was heartfelt, not flattery or pretense. I conveyed my true feelings. Perhaps moved by my passion, my in-laws reluctantly smiled and accepted my proposal. However, immediately after agreeing, they continued with a but. Gina, why don't you live with us? You were looking for a house to live with John, weren't you? That's right. If you don't mind, let's live together. After we're gone, the house will belong to you guys anyway. John has one older brother. 3 years older, he had married and moved out years ago. Busy with his own business, he entrusted all home matters to John, as I had heard from my mother-in-law. In return for taking care of my in-laws, John was free to do as he wished with their property. Before marrying and moving out, his brother had verbally promised John this arrangement. If we could live in the new house, which would become our family home, the commute to work would be closer. Living together, we could be of help in case of any issues. And there was indeed no reason not to. However, living with a stranger like me might cause inconvenience to my in-laws. Despite the trouble I had caused even before marrying, I hesitated to agree, feeling anxious about whether it was okay for me to live with them. Sensing my hesitation, John put his hand on my shoulder and smiled reassuringly. I will be your support. Everything will be all right. Don't worry. With those words from John, I agreed to live with my in-laws. I thought we would live happily as a family of 4 from then on. However, such a sweet life did not exist. Gina, where did you put my morning clothes? Mrs. Gina, the TV remote isn't working. Gina, can you lend me a shoulder? I want to sit on the sofa. After moving in together for 13 years, the people in this house have been telling me to do everything. They have no intention of doing anything themselves, and everyone asks me for everything. Even my father-in-law, taking advantage of his disability, has been freely touching me wherever he wants. I've already prepared and hung the morning clothes, haven't I? Mom, that's the air conditioner remote, and the TV remote is on the desk. Dad, please let John assist you when he's here, not me. I can't support you properly. Initially, I tolerated the dissatisfaction and handled everyone's needs. It's a joke to be burdened with both the mortgage and all the household duties. I thought about divorce many times. However, each time John skillfully covered for me, and my in-laws pleaded. My resolve wavered, and I refrained from divorcing. Finally, my mother-in-law possibly started showing mild cognitive impairment or dementia, though it's unclear which. John, who had always said he would be my support before marriage, turned out to be utterly unreliable. Can I really continue like this? With these doubts, I continued living, but as you experience things, you adapt. Before I knew it, I had adjusted to the environment, completed everything before being told, and became able to express my opinions clearly to John and others. However, I couldn't overlook my father-in-law's overbearing actions. And I complained to both John and even my mother-in-law. I just can't overlook what Dad does. Recently, he even pretends to be senile to touch me. Mom, please do something about it. My father-in-law has not been diagnosed with dementia. Specifically, he went for a diagnosis, but was not officially diagnosed with dementia. It's too mild to judge whether it's cognitive impairment or not, according to the doctor. Don't say that. It's because of his disability. Can't be helped. It's true that tendencies of dementia can cause such behavior. However, such things happen in more severe stages. As for my father-in-law's actions, he is just doing whatever he wants, using the word cognitive as a shield. Despite explaining that the doctor did not diagnose him with dementia, my in-laws stubbornly insist he has it, and conveniently use it to excuse any inconvenient behavior. If it were really dementia, I wouldn't say a thing. However, using illness as a shield to impose patience on others is absolutely unacceptable. I've also spoken to John, asking him to do something about his parents. But every time, he shows annoyance and brushes it off, saying we'll handle it later. I was reaching my limit of patience when something completely unexpected happened. This month it's all paid off. I'll finally be freed from this hell. One afternoon, when I was off work, I was organizing the household accounts and my diary. While looking at the bank book, I realized something that brightened my expression at the end of this month. The mortgage for the in-laws' house would finally be repaid. Filled with a sense of accomplishment, I felt as though a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Thinking that I would now have a little more money to spend freely made me incredibly happy. But this was just the beginning of the real hell. Gina, was the mortgage payoff supposed to be this month? During dinner that night, John suddenly asked about the mortgage. He had never mentioned it before, so I was puzzled by his sudden interest. He smiled affably and poured beer into a glass for me. Yes, but why do you ask all of a sudden? Well, shouldn't we celebrate? I've put a lot of pressure on you up until now. Gina. I mean it as a thank you, and I want to have a big celebration. I was taken aback by his unexpected words. I was surprised that John thought this way, and that he was aware of the burden he had placed on me. I thought to myself that he could have helped more with the housework. But it seemed he had his own thoughts about everything. Any dissatisfaction I felt vanished in an instant with his words. And I couldn't help but smile broadly. John, thank you. Can I look forward to the celebration? Of course. I'll discuss it with my parents and start preparing. Just look forward to it, Gina. Without any doubts, I accepted his invitation. It seemed he had already discussed this with his parents, and the three of them started making preparations. A few weeks later, I was summoned by John and his parents. It was a calm period at work, and I had some free time, making it a good time to be celebrated. Sorry for calling you out of the blue like this. That's totally fine. Today, we, as a family, have something important to discuss with you, Gina. Discuss? I thought it might be about the celebration. But why would they phrase it so ominously? Normally, they would just say it straightforwardly. With these doubts, I listened attentively to their conversation. Actually, along with the mortgage repayment. We'd like you to move out of the house, Gina. Huh? At their unexpected words, I blurted out in shock. Leave the house along with the mortgage repayment? What am I being told? Could it be a misunderstanding? Even if I wished it were, the statement wouldn't be unreasonable. I couldn't quite grasp what John had said. leaving me utterly dumbfounded and unable to respond to his question. Seeing my stunned reaction, my in-laws, growing impatient, quickly continued speaking. We sold the house to the eldest son and his wife. What? I couldn't understand at all. Just as I was told to move out. Now they say the house has been sold to the eldest son and his wife. They must mean I'm no longer needed, but such an unreasonable claim was unbearable. What have I done to deserve this? If we've given you such a fine house as a gift, then we no longer have any need for you, Gina. We only lived together with you until the mortgage was paid off because we had to. But now that we own the house, you're of no use to us. I had felt immense gratitude towards John's family. I had been so grateful to his family for helping my father. And me that I lived with them without complaint until today. But now, I realized it was all an act. They helped my father and me back then just to make me do something. They knew I was desperate to pay off my father's debt and become a lawyer. So they thought investing in me might pay off double. It was just a gamble. Everything was set up to make me buy the house. You were right to think that if you owed us a favor, you'd give us something big in return. Ever since we were dating, I've been doing this. And I never thought the investment would be wasted. Just going to check on Dad once made you so happy. And you'd give us expensive wine as thanks. What a gullible woman. That was before my father's company went bankrupt. Our family was fairly well off until then. John had targeted me from the beginning for my family's wealth. And he already knew I was aiming to be a lawyer. That's why he thought it was worth going this far. Unaware of all this, I completely trusted John and his family. How foolish. I felt disgusted with myself. That's why we planned this. If we did a favor for your father, maybe we'd get something big in return. As a result, a huge success. We got this fine, newly built house in our name. Once the mortgage is paid off, it's ours. We can do whatever we want with our own property. And you have no right to say anything about it, do you? It was hard to accept the inhuman statements of the three people. Everything had been planned from the beginning. For these 13 years, the three of them had been quietly waiting for this moment. They never loved me. Nor did they genuinely care about my father, they just saw him as a money tree. From the beginning, they had approached our family with this scenario in mind. Faced with this unbelievable reality, I felt like everything was going dark before my eyes. My emotions were plummeting into the abyss. This was truly despair. At that moment, the word despair perfectly described my state. I couldn't comprehend what they had done, thought, or were doing. That's why, strangers like you should get out now. You no longer have a place in this house. Of course you have some luggage, so right now is impossible. John, that would be too pitiful. Tomorrow. We'll give you until tomorrow. So, pack up your things and get out by then. This house now belongs to us, the Kane family. Oh, and we'll need a divorce too. There's no need to be married anymore, and I'm tired of your nagging. When you leave the house tomorrow, just sign on the divorce papers. The words Kane family weighed heavily on my mind. From the beginning, I was not treated as a member of the Kane family. That's why they treated me so unfairly, worked me like a slave, and made me juggle home and work like a workhorse. As all the pieces finally connected, a dry smile spilled from me. From the beginning, I was deceived by your family. That's what I've been saying. Are you that stupid? Can't you understand even that? John's last words seemed to snap something inside me. I lifted my bowed head, feigned a full smile, and gave my in-laws a surprising reply. Then, I'll be moving out. Suddenly displaying a bright smile, I casually agreed to leave the house, leaving John and my in-laws with shocked expressions. Wow, you're being surprisingly obedient. What are you plotting? Plotting? That's impossible. This sudden, nonsensical story has knocked me down to the lowest point of my life. That's why my love for your family cooled off instantly. I'll pack my things and leave today. I will also sign the divorce papers properly. Later, I'll have someone from my office contact you about the division of property. Thank you for everything up to now. After saying this, I didn't wait for a reply from my in-laws and rushed to my room. I suppressed the urge to cry as I packed, thinking about what would come next. I can't let them get away with treating me like a rag. I must make them experience the pain they've inflicted on me. Otherwise, I'd regret it when I die. While packing, I decided on revenge. And to really hurt them, I pondered what could be done. As I was packing, a phone call came in. Seeing the caller's name, I came up with a plan. This person might be able to help me. The moment I thought that, I answered the call and confided everything to them. We discussed the next steps and agreed to put the plan into action immediately. After finishing packing, I left the house where I had lived for many years without saying goodbye to John and his family, and I immediately deleted their contact information. I set things up so they couldn't reach me, and it worked right away. The day after I left the house, I received a barrage of calls from my in-laws. Although I had deleted their contact, my brain naturally remembered the familiar numbers. Seeing those unwanted numbers first thing in the morning was disheartening. They must have realized what had happened to them by now. But I did not answer their calls. Like watching from a higher ground, I looked down at my phone and smiled. "You don't ever have to answer," said the person who had taken me in, speaking kindly to me. I nodded to them just once. Then, calls from John started coming in. Overwhelmed by the noise, I reached my limit, turned off my phone, and never turned it on again. I canceled the service. Several months later, I found a new apartment and started living there. I handled my work smoothly and enriched every day without the stress I had felt while living at my in-laws' house. Free from the environment that had been a burden on my life. After the divorce, people told me I looked healthier, more beautiful, and brighter, and I received more compliments on my approachability. Previously, my mind had been so preoccupied with my in-laws' house that I hadn't had time to socialize properly at work. From now on, I'm going to work harder. I'll communicate more with everyone. I'll value my relationships with people. It was then that something happened. The receptionist at my office rushed onto the floor, her face pale, and spoke to me urgently. "Ms. Walters, there's a parent and child at the reception yelling for Ms. Walters to come out." Walters is my maiden name, and my current surname. Normally, she handles her duties coolly and amiably. So it must be something serious for her to be so upset. A concerned male colleague offered to accompany me. And as we headed to the lobby, I saw the person there and my expression hardened. There she is. "Mom, I found Gina." "Gina? What do you mean by this? Cutting off contact is cruel. Do you have any idea what we've been through since then?" The people who had come were my mother-in-law and John. And they were shouting throughout the office. Their nerve to act so shamelessly had me doubting their sanity. And their disgraceful behavior drew disgusted looks from everyone around. In just a few months without seeing them, their faces had become gaunt. And they glared at me with bloodshot eyes. Sensing the gravity of the situation, another receptionist seemed to have gone to call someone higher up. And soon after, the president, having heard the commotion, appeared in the lobby. "Miss Walters, I have prepared a reception room. Why don't you talk to your in-laws there? I will contact him." Since I had confided everything to the president beforehand, I nodded to his suggestion. I felt uneasy going alone with them, so I asked my colleague to accompany me. He was the lawyer I had hired for the issue with John. So John and his parents agreed to his presence. We all headed to the reception room. Even as we walked to the reception room, John and his mother glared at me resentfully. Despite their own desperate situation, they seemed to dislike seeing me enjoying my work carefree. Their gazes and demeanor made it abundantly clear how much they disliked the atmosphere. As I sat facing John and his mother, continuing our stare down, a person came into the reception room with the president. "Sorry, I'm late." "What? Why is my brother here?" The person the president brought was John's brother, my brother-in-law. He stood imposingly, glaring at the two with an angry expression. "There's no crap here." "You two, how dare you pull such a stunt?" My brother-in-law had been a tough guy since the old days, and when he was younger, he was the leader of a biker gang that controlled this area. Now, he runs his own company in the construction industry. His employees affectionately call him boss. And he despises behavior that strays from human decency. I had sought help from my brother-in-law for this situation, and he was furious when he heard the circumstances. He had sheltered me in the female dormitory of his workplace for several weeks, taking care of me until I found a place to live. He had also checked on the house that was given to my in-laws. My brother-in-law had been unaware of everything until I informed him. The reason my brother-in-law hadn't known about any of this was because my mother-in-law and others had declared that they had sold the house to the eldest son and his wife when they told me to leave. The reason he didn't know. I had Sandra spill the beans and checked everything out behind the scenes. They've done such a terrible thing to Gina. They don't think they can get away with it, do they? The moment Sandra's name was mentioned, John and his mother's faces turned pale. Sandra, my brother-in-law's wife, was the mastermind behind this whole series. As the wife of the eldest son, she had despised me for some reason since a long time ago. She had been a housewife all her life, following her husband's orders not because he demanded it, but because her parents had taught her that a woman's place is in the home. Living with the belief that women who can't manage household chores aren't real women. She had lived her life according to that principle. But how must I have appeared to her? My vibrant dedication to my work must have been dazzling to her, overturning nearly 40 years of her fixed beliefs. Moreover, Sandra was disastrously bad at cooking. Even my father-in-law had studied cooking and had asked my mother-in-law to teach her, which John had told me about, indicating just how poor her skills were. However, I am someone who can manage household chores normally. Moreover, I was able to handle housework better than Sandra while also balancing my job. She must have been envious of me, who could do everything. Every time we met, Sandra would make snide remarks to me. She would say things like I neglected my home because of my job or call me a wife without gumption for making her husband do household chores. I had been subjected to such nasty comments countless times over the decades. But each time, my brother-in-law had stopped her. Surely, that too was a source of displeasure for Sandra. My brother-in-law had even told her she could go to work if she wanted to. And he contributed to the household chores himself. It was her own decision not to take action. And it was entirely misplaced for her to lash out at others for that. When my brother-in-law lectured Sandra about this, She began to detest me, as if taking her frustrations out on me. When I confronted Sandra, she confessed that the whole plan to take over the house and make me buy it was orchestrated by her. She had instigated our parents into this plan, thinking that if they owned the house and pretended to be senile, Gina wouldn't be able to say anything to them, thinking it safe to contact my brother-in-law while I was unable to do so. Everyone did as they pleased. John had also been paid a role in this affair, making everyone accomplices. The only one who had been completely unaware was my brother-in-law. If he had known, such foolishness could have been stopped. I believe he feels terribly sorry about this whole situation. I see. That's why everyone behaved themselves in front of you, Big Brother. Every time my brother-in-law came to the house, my in-laws did not dare to do anything. They probably knew what would happen if he found out about their actions. The president and my colleagues listening to the conversation were also appalled by how my in-laws were behaving. So, what should we do with you? We're not planning to forgive a single thing. Not the disgrace you brought upon us, nor the trouble you caused Gina. But this all started with Sandra. That's right. We just got carried away by her convincing talk. We didn't mean any harm. No harm, you say? Hearing John's words, my patience snapped. I stood up abruptly, my face contorted with rage, and shouted at my mother-in-law and John. You think no harm intended excuses what you did? Do you have any idea how I've felt these past 13 years, staying by your side? As I vented the feelings I'd been suppressing, tears of anger and frustration spilled out. Neither my mother-in-law nor John had ever seen me cry. No matter how harshly they treated me, I endured and persevered. Even when I was accused of dementia and harassed at will, I never showed any tears. I lived through it all. They probably thought of me as a strong woman who never cries. Seeing such a person raise their voice and shed tears must have been shocking for them. Do you even understand how grateful I was to you all? How much I thought I owed you a debt of gratitude? To find out that your kindness was for such a vile reason. I can't forgive you. I will never forgive you. As I spoke, my brother-in-law called someone into the conference room, and a man in a black suit entered. He sat on our sofa and stared intently at my in-laws. We're going to thoroughly strip you of your assets. What? In a daze, my mother-in-law let out a bewildered cry. This gentleman is the lawyer my brother-in-law hired for me. He's a well-known sharp lawyer in our firm, almost like a mentor to me. Including all the injustices you've inflicted, we're going to demand compensation. What? That's too late. How many months do you think have passed since then? Time doesn't matter here. The lawyer interjected, adjusting his glasses and fixing them with a sharp gaze. Based on the physical evidence at the time, and our reasons for wanting to claim compensation, it is possible to make a claim. As far as this case is concerned, there was no agreement made at the time of divorce to refrain from claiming money. Therefore, there is no specific deadline to file a claim, making it possible to pursue compensation. Furthermore, the lawyer then pulled an SSD from his pocket, leaving my in-laws blinking in confusion. What's that? This is a record of all the abuses your family has committed against Gina, stored as data from the camera attached to her PC for remote meetings. Upon learning this, my in-laws' faces turned pale. Gina often worked in the living room, where modern laptops typically have built-in cameras. You unknowingly harassed her there, which has now turned against you. The lawyer promptly put the SSD back into his pocket and continued with a cold look. The property has already been transferred back to Gina's name. Your eviction is only a matter of time. We will arrange for legal action soon. Please prepare the money. Wait a minute. You changed the title. John's reaction, almost reflexive, was immediately addressed by my brother-in-law. I told Gina to transfer the title to her. Thanks to you changing it to Sandra without asking, we were able to make the switch smoothly. Do you have any complaints about that? As my brother-in-law confronted him with a menacing smile. John, who had never won a fight against him since they were kids, couldn't muster a response. My mother-in-law, too, remained silent. We'll also be billing you for the expenses incurred from the transfer. It's only right since you caused this mess. We have to clean up the seeds you sowed. With arms crossed and standing authoritatively, my brother-in-law expressed his stern opinion. And neither of them could say a word in response. He had already informed Sandra in the same manner. And he had told me over the phone that he planned to divorce her once everything settled down. Despite not knowing anything, I'm terribly sorry for involving you in this mess, he said. I'll support you with all I can to make things right for you. Just tell me what you need. It's my family that did this, and I bear some responsibility too. If my brother-in-law hadn't reached out to me that day when I was packing, I might not have been able to do anything. I might still be suffering alone. Being part of that side, if I had no one to rely on, I couldn't have recovered like this. I never realized how much having even one person to support me could give me strength. I glared at the two of them, grateful for my brother-in-law's kindness and warmth, and delivered my final blow. I will never forgive you for using my and my father's emotions to fatten your own bliss. No matter how much you try to atone, I have no intention of forgiving you. If you come to the company again, I will definitely call the police. From now on, handle everything through my lawyer here. Do not appear before me ever again. Thanks to the president and my colleagues, who stayed as witnesses to the entire conversation. My in-laws had no way to escape blame. Shortly after, John and his parents moved out of the house. Considering the house they made me buy, the marriage arranged for that purpose, and the mental and physical suffering since the marriage, I really wanted to squeeze more out of them, he grumbled, feeling it was insufficient. But the lawyer and I agreed this was realistic, so that was all we could get. I shook my head, indicating that was incredible. Normally, even severe cases of psychological abuse fetch around $30,000. Considering the compounded offenses, the amount extracted was well above the norm. I was nothing but grateful. The house returned to my possession within a few days. It seemed my brother-in-law supervised the removal of furniture and appliances, and I was able to retrieve everything successfully. I am now offering the place as a rental property. It's still too large for me to live in, and being well located and barrier-free, it seemed wasteful to leave it unused. Following advice from my brother-in-law, I decided to rent it out. As per his declaration, Sandra is living a restricted life until she repays her debt. She is forced to work from morning till night. And my mother-in-law and John are in the same condition. My father-in-law couldn't participate due to his disability, but his pension is being garnished to pay off the debts. And it seems they are all living a hellish life. I felt relieved to know I could rely on my brother-in-law. Years have passed since then. I continue to work diligently as a lawyer. Thanks to my brother-in-law, the monthly payments have been made without fail, and the debt is expected to be fully paid off the year after next. Despite having thought about ending my life numerous times during those hellish times, I persevered, and as they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I live my days grateful for each one.
One day, my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer and given only 6 months to live. I asked my husband, George, and his mother if it would be possible to live with my mother for her last days. They responded, "She's going to die soon anyway, right? No point in trying so hard. It won't cure her, it's just a waste of time. Why would you say something so terrible?" Ultimately, George and my mother-in-law did not agree to let her live with us, and my mother passed away alone. Several years later, my mother-in-law was diagnosed with the same terminal cancer. George immediately decided to live with his mother, but I could not forgive and accept it. My name is Stacy. I am 35 years old. 8 years ago, I married George, who is 2 years older than me. We used to work at the same company, but I quit my job to become a housewife after we got married. In the early days, George was very caring, and I spent each day grateful to be married to him. However, I've always been a bit uncomfortable around my mother-in-law. She grew up a well-to-do lady without hardships, whereas my mother had a tough life growing up in a poor family. The two had very different values, especially my mother-in-law, who didn't think much of my mother. My mother-in-law and mother rarely saw each other, so there were no major issues for now. George knew his mother disliked my mother and promised, "If Mom says anything weird to Stacy's mom, I'll scold her. Don't worry." And indeed, when my mother-in-law spoke ill of my mother, George defended her, which was a great comfort and reassurance to me. However, there was one thing that worried me. Recently, when I visited my parents' home after a long time, my mother said, "I've been feeling off lately. I don't think it's an illness though. Given her generally frail health, she seemed more worn out than before. Having more free time, I thought I might need to care for my mother soon. So I used my spare time to obtain a caregiver's certification. I wanted to be prepared to respond immediately when needed, and I asked George if I could work as a caregiver. "Sure, why not? Just make sure you take care of the house too." So I started working as a caregiver. 4 years into our marriage, when we were thinking about having children, I discovered I was pregnant. George and my mother-in-law were thrilled about the pregnancy. Everyone celebrated the new addition to the family. However, I still wanted to continue my caregiver work. Having seen my father pass away when I was young, I felt a strong desire to care for my mother myself if anything happened to her. Initially, George and my mother-in-law opposed it, worrying about the baby, but eventually, they reluctantly allowed me to continue working. I was getting used to my job as a caregiver when one day during lunch, I received a call. "Hello, Stacy. Please stay calm. Your mother has collapsed and been taken to the hospital." "Hello? What? Really?" "Yes, she suddenly collapsed and had to be rushed to emergency." The call came from my mother's boss at her workplace. After hanging up, I was rooted to the spot. What if something happens to my mother? With a sinking feeling and a pounding heart, I rushed to the hospital. I was led into the doctor's office, where I was told, "Honestly, it's terminal lung cancer. Even with surgery and various treatments, she won't last long." The doctor continued, "We will keep treating her, but in the last month or so, You will have to choose whether she spends it in a palliative care ward or at home. She has expressed a desire to spend her remaining time with you. I needed to discuss this with George, so I returned home. George already knew I had been to the hospital. What did the doctor say? Terminal lung cancer, untreatable, and not much time left. Could we let her live with us for the last bit? I proposed this to George, but my mother-in-law, who was visiting our home, intervened. Why? She's already on her way out. Just leave her care to a facility. Clearly, my mother-in-law still disliked my mother. I couldn't believe her words. George, I hoped, would defend me, but he agreed with my mother-in-law. True, it would be uncomfortable to have a sick person in the house. Even so, I obtained a caregiver's certificate for times like this. I'm qualified and ready. Please, let me take care of my mother at our home. No matter how many times you ask, it's depressing just having that poor person around. And it's better to leave the care of someone dying to a hospital or a facility. My mother-in-law stubbornly refused the cohabitation. Mother is right. If you start caregiving, what about the housework? And I'll feel obliged to be considerate when I come home tired from work. Absolutely no cohabitation. Despite my desperate pleas, George and my mother-in-law did not approve of living with my mother. I returned to the hospital and explained the situation to my mother. I'm sorry. I wanted to live together, but George and his mother didn't allow it. As I recalled the rejection and my mother's treatment, I cried. Then my mother smiled and said, "What are you talking about, Stacy? I'm very happy that you tried so hard to live with me. Don't worry about anything." Hearing this, I could only cry out loud. If we couldn't care for her at home, I wanted at least to find her a good palliative care ward. After a desperate search, I found a suitable hospital nearby. From then on, I juggled work and house chores to visit my mother daily. But as much as my mother-in-law and even George disliked my mother, he never accompanied me on visits. Work keeps me busy, so I can't really show up. My husband had been refusing to visit, and he continued to do so even on his days off. It's your day off, so work isn't an issue, right? Won't you come to visit with me today? I tried to persuade him, but he responded with clear annoyance. Can't you just let me relax on my rare day off? And he declined yet again. Sorry, George, he didn't come again today. I apologized to my mother during one of the visits, but she replied, "It's perfectly fine. Having you come every day is enough for me. Plus, my coworkers and neighbors visit me too. I'm quite popular, you know." Despite her suffering from cancer, she tried not to burden me or George. One day, as my pregnancy progressed and my belly grew, I said, "Mom, you have to stay healthy until the grandchild is born, okay?" "Sure, but I can already feel that I don't have much time left." For the first time, my mother expressed her weakness to me. "Mom, please don't say that. I will cure you, and you will dote on your grandchild." I felt deep inside that it might be the end, but I couldn't bear the thought of my mother dying. From that day, my mother's health deteriorated daily, and one day, a nurse from the hospital where she was admitted called me. "Stacy, your mother is in critical condition. Please come immediately. She might not make it much longer." "I understand. I'll be there right away." As I hurried to the hospital, I called my husband, George, to inform him that my mother was in a critical state. But he replied, "Really? I'm busy with work, so I can't come," and hung up. "Mom, please hang on." Although she was still alive, she did not respond to my desperate calls. I called George again, hoping he would come to the hospital, but he snapped, "Enough already. I told you I'm working," and hung up again. His indifference was too much to bear. "Stacy." At that moment, my mother weakly called my name. I noticed and desperately called out to her, "Mom, Mom." But after that, she did not respond to my calls. In the end, without ever seeing her grandchild, my mother passed away after 6 months in the hospital. Not being able to care for her at home and not showing her grandchild were my deepest regrets. But I was grateful that I could be there for her in her final moments. Mom has just passed away. I called George again when my mother passed away, but he merely responded, "I see. That's unfortunate," without ever showing his face at the hospital. Furthermore, he didn't help at all with the funeral, acting as if it had nothing to do with him. "Hey, she was your mother-in-law. Couldn't you help out a little?" Frustrated with his uncooperative attitude, I confronted him, but he retorted, "Whether I help or not is my decision. How many times do I have to tell you, why should I help with the funeral of someone I didn't even like? It's your mother, so you should handle it, right?" His response was shockingly callous. I was so appalled by my husband that I decided not to rely on him for anything related to my mother. "Stacy, are you okay? If there's anything I can do, please let me know." During these tough times, only my aunt, who had come to offer condolences, showed concern for me. She also took care of the inheritance procedures, which was a huge relief. "Hey, Stacy, what's your husband doing? Your mother has passed away, and he's doing nothing." My aunt seemed concerned that my husband was not helping at all with the funeral arrangements or the inheritance procedures. "I'm sorry. It seems like he's busy with work." I could only manage to reply to my aunt, "It's not your fault, Stacy. Normally, a husband should support his wife and take care of things. Is there really a job more important than dealing with a loved one's death?" Moved by her words, I found myself crying. I had felt the same way, and hearing her say it aloud was somewhat relieving. I was truly grateful for my aunt's presence. Although George and my in-laws did attend the funeral, George muttered, "I really hate such gloomy places," even during the funeral. "When will this be over? I want to go home." My mother-in-law looked utterly bored throughout the event, yawning and muttering complaints as if she wished she were anywhere else. I thought to myself that it would have been better if she had not attended at all, and it seemed my aunt felt the same way. "Stacy, that attitude is just appalling. It would have been far better if they hadn't shown up at all. It's unbelievable, really. Are they even the same kind of people as us?" she said angrily, expressing her frustration about how my husband and his mother disrespected her sister's funeral. Thus, my mother's death created a huge rift between my husband and me. Honestly, at this point, I was considering divorce. I was so angry at how my mother had been treated that I felt like I might explode. But ultimately, I couldn't go through with the divorce. The thought of raising my soon-to-be-born child alone was daunting. Although I was working, it was only part-time, and without a stable income or my husband's earnings, living would be challenging, forcing me to rely on him. I had initially taken up the caregiver job for my mother, and while I could have quit, the job was fulfilling, and more importantly, I needed the income for my child, so I decided to keep working for a while longer. After some time, my son was born. Seeing my newborn son, who somehow reminded me of my mother, I broke down thinking he might be her reincarnation. "Stacy, you did well giving birth. Thank you. What a healthy boy." Even George, who was indifferent to others, and my mother-in-law, who was generally unenthusiastic, were very pleased this time. However, when my mother-in-law said, "You really did well giving birth. Now that the heir is here, we're set," I shuddered to think what she might have said if it had been a daughter instead. Due to childbirth and childcare, I decided to take a break from my caregiver job. My mother-in-law criticized, "How can a mother think of sending an infant to daycare? That's neglect." Not understanding that it's quite common for working parents to use daycare for infants nowadays, she clearly had outdated views. Having lost my mother to cancer, and with no one to help look after my son, and lacking the ability to earn enough money on my own, I reluctantly quit my job as my mother-in-law suggested. Looking back, I regret not considering other options, like asking my aunt, who had helped with the funeral, to look after my son while I worked. Eventually, I resumed my caregiver job when my son was old enough to attend daycare. I still had much to learn about caregiving and felt a strong attachment to the profession, so I returned to work during the hours he was at daycare. Life went on without major issues, and watching my son grow, I often wished I could have shown him to my mother, but I comforted myself thinking she must be watching over us from heaven. 4 years after my mother's death, George came home earlier than usual one day, saying he had something important to discuss. It was rare for him to initiate a conversation, so I felt a bit anxious. "So, what is it?" George started. "Listen carefully. Mom has collapsed." Hearing this, I thought to myself, good. She finally got what she deserved for how she treated my mother. But then George added, "It seems to be terminal cancer. The same lung cancer as your mother. There's nothing that can be done, and she doesn't have much time left." He looked somber as he continued. "So, what now? Where will she be treated?" George replied, "Mom's last wish is to live with us. So, I've already arranged for her to move from her house to ours. Please take care of it." Shockingly, George had decided to live with his mother without consulting me first. It was such a sudden announcement, and I couldn't accept it. Live together? I wasn't informed about this at all. I challenged him angrily. "So, I'm telling you now, or what? Are you planning to oppose me living with my mother at our home?" I had no choice but to be astounded by my husband George's response. Didn't he remember what he had said when my mother was in the same situation a few years ago? "Of course I'm opposed. Don't you remember what happened when my mom was in the same situation? What did you say? You said it was tiring to have a sick person in the house. Unless you plan to take full responsibility yourself, I assume you're just going to dump it all on me again?" I confronted George with these words, but he replied, "I'm too busy with work to be there all the time. Plus, we couldn't live without my income, right? Stacy, caregiving is your profession, so you should quit your job and take care of my mother." Clearly, George intended to leave all the caregiving responsibilities to me. While I can't deny that his income supports our normal lifestyle, I was so angry that I threw back at him the very words he and my mother-in-law had said to me back then. "Why should we bother taking care of your mother in this house if she's already on her way out? I have my own job, so I can't be bothered." The moment I said that, George's face turned red. "How dare you speak about my mother like that?" he shouted. "I'm just repeating what you and your mother told me years ago. Why should I have to live with your mother?" I retorted sarcastically, "It's natural for a daughter-in-law to take care of her mother-in-law. My mother is practically your mother too. What nonsense are you talking about? My real mother is already dead, and your mother is nothing like mine." George was making no sense, so I countered him. "That might be so, but it's normal to think of your mother-in-law that way. There was no way I could treat my mother-in-law the way he suggested, knowing how horribly my own mother was treated. If that's what you're saying, then you take care of your mother entirely by yourself. I absolutely won't help," I told George bluntly and headed to my son's room. Our loud argument had surely been heard by my son. When I entered his room to check on him, he asked, "Mom, are you okay?" "Sorry, did you hear us arguing because we were speaking so loudly?" I said while stroking his head. "I'm okay. I'm just sad to see you look so sad, Mom. I'm on your side, Mom." Even though he was only 4 years old and probably didn't understand the details of our discussion, he tried to comfort me. My son was such a good child, yet his father couldn't muster the decency to consider others. At that moment, I made a decision to protect my son, who stood by me. Ultimately, George and I couldn't agree on living with my mother-in-law, but he began staying at his parents' home to sort out my mother-in-law's belongings. It was convenient for me that George wasn't coming home because I had already decided to divorce him. About 2 weeks ago, my aunt mentioned seeing George walking arm in arm with another woman after my mother's funeral. "Stacy, I think your husband might be cheating on you." Despite my anger during my mother's illness, I had stayed with George for my son's sake. But I couldn't stand it anymore after hearing my aunt's suspicions of infidelity. I enlisted my aunt's help to hire a detective agency to investigate. The agency found clear evidence of infidelity. It really was true. I can't live with him anymore. I showed the evidence to a lawyer introduced by my aunt and asked for legal representation. The lawyer prepared various documents to ensure the divorce would go smoothly. Having decided to divorce, I planned to leave the house with my son the day George and my mother-in-law were due to return. George regularly sent messages while he was at his parents' house, but they were one-sided messages like, "Have you quit your job yet? The cohabitation is starting soon. Is everything ready?" I read all his messages, but chose to ignore them. On the day my mother-in-law's belongings were to be moved to our house, George arranged to follow the truck carrying her things home. "Hey, what's going on? I didn't hear anything about you suddenly disappearing." After the moving was done, I received a message from George. Having decided to ignore him up to now, I sent back just one line. Since it's the last time, you can call me. Seconds after sending the message, George called. Stacy, where have you guys gone? Explain what this is all about. Over the phone, I told him. What do you mean? You proceeded with the cohabitation on your own, so I'm just doing what I want to, right? That might be, but there was no need to leave the divorce papers and disappear. I had signed the divorce papers and left them on the living room table when I moved out with my son. I continued firmly as George's anger did not subside. The divorce has nothing to do with the cohabitation. You said you were staying to sort out your mother's stuff, right? But you were actually cheating, weren't you? I can't live with someone like that. George fell silent as if his earlier fervor was a lie. So you're silent now, which means it was true. Remember my aunt? She saw you cheating. What? That was just seen by chance. It might not be true. Thinking you would say that, I had my aunt help me, and we had a detective agency investigate your cheating. Indeed, she was one of your colleagues, wasn't she? Did you think I would always do as you say? You're sorely mistaken. My serious anger finally seemed to reach George. Perhaps realizing he had no more room to argue, he said, All right, I hear what you're saying, and I'll listen properly. So come back home. I regret the affair, and I'll apologize properly. I'll also reconsider living with my mother. Please come back. George appeared quite desperate, but I felt a sense of vindication. Sorry, but my son and I have chosen to become strangers to you. From now on, please talk through my lawyer. Don't expect me to answer if you call me. With that, I hung up the phone. Even as George continued to rant to the end, I ignored it. After hanging up, I felt relieved in an apartment. Having decided to leave home with my son, I struggled to find a good place, so I consulted my aunt. Why don't you live in one of the apartments I own? My aunt kindly offered us a room. I'm really sorry for relying on you for everything. Don't worry about it. It's natural to want to help a dear niece and her child. But I regret not speaking up sooner when your mother passed away. Hearing my aunt's words, I couldn't help but cry. Back when I was pregnant with my son, all I could think about was how financially challenging it would be if I divorced then. I deeply regretted not divorcing my husband sooner and relying on my aunt, as it would have spared me the frustrations I experienced back then. It's okay. I'm here for you now. Let's keep moving forward together. Seeing me in tears, my aunt must have sensed something and comforted me with those words. With her support, I was ready to proceed with the divorce from my husband. 3 days later, my lawyer called, suggesting, Your husband has been calling non-stop, but he seems unwilling to agree to a divorce. It seems we're at an impasse, so let's meet and settle this once and for all. I'll be there too, of course. Although I never wanted to see my husband again, I agreed since the lawyer would be present. The meeting was set at the lawyer's office. On the day of the discussion, I left my son with my aunt and went to the lawyer's office alone. When I entered the room, my husband and the lawyer were already seated. This scoundrel! How dare you just leave like that? My husband immediately started yelling as he saw me, but the lawyer calmed him down and got him to sit back down. Today, we need to discuss 3 main topics. the divorce itself, compensation, and child support. The lawyer started, but I expected that my mother-in-law would also come up in the conversation. The discussion began, and I calmly asked my husband, "When will you sign the divorce papers and submit them to the city hall?" "What are you talking about? I've told you I don't want a divorce. Is this because you want me to take care of your mother?" "Don't make me say it again. It's natural for a daughter-in-law to care for her mother-in-law." As usual, my husband was spouting his nonsensical beliefs. Unfortunately, there's no such rule, and to think you wouldn't divorce after cheating is astonishing. Cheating has nothing to do with this. No, it very much does. You wouldn't let me live with my mother, but you unilaterally decided your mother should live with us, and assumed I would take care of her, while you went off to have fun with another woman. Let me make this clear. I am neither your servant nor your housekeeper, nor am I a dedicated caregiver. As our argument escalated, the lawyer intervened. "What will you do, sir? If you continue to refuse the divorce, we can take this to court. It's up to you, but let me be clear, you have almost no chance of winning. Any lawyer you hire knowing it's a losing battle would be hard to find. Even if you find one, it will be costly." Faced with the lawyer's blunt statement, my husband's face turned pale. It seemed he was finally reflecting on his actions, but it was too late. "Is there really no chance I can win?" "No, I can assure you, you will lose. We have ample evidence of your infidelity." Crushed by the lawyer's final word, my husband slumped. Eventually, realizing he had no way out, he agreed to the divorce. The settlement included $30,000 for infidelity and monthly child support payments, and the divorce was finalized smoothly. My husband's affair with his subordinate came to light at his company, thanks to someone I used to work with in the same department. The subordinate ended up resigning, and while my husband wasn't fired, he was moved to a less important department. With the responsibility of caring for his mother and frequent absences from work, I heard from a former colleague that he was struggling to make the compensation and child support payments due to his decreased income. His financial struggles were compounded when his affair became public, leading to his transfer and a significant salary reduction. He ended up working night shifts just to make ends meet. Consequently, he had to give up on caring for his mother at home, moving her to a palliative care ward instead, which further strained his finances. Apparently, he has lost a lot of weight due to stress and lack of food, bearing little resemblance to the man he once was. Meanwhile, with my aunt's support, I successfully continued my work as a caregiver and even upgraded my skills enough to earn a caregiving certificate, increasing my income. Now my son and I can live comfortably, though not lavishly. Is it really okay to rent me this beautiful apartment for just $300 a month? Feeling guilty about the deal I was getting, I asked my aunt again, but she insisted. "I've told you it's fine." Knowing that I was concerned, my aunt added a gentle condition to the arrangement for renting the apartment. "Then, I'll add just one condition for renting. Every month on the anniversary of my sister's and your mother's passing, invite me over for a meal together." I was initially taken aback, thinking if that was really all she wanted. "All right, maybe I could order some takeout every month," I started to suggest, but before I could finish, my aunt interjected with a smile. No, I want to eat the food you make, Stacy. Understood. I'll cook whatever you like. With that, I agreed to my aunt's terms and started my new life in the apartment. Since moving in, we've held our monthly dinners as promised. My son has grown very fond of my aunt, who treats him like a real grandmother. I look forward to maintaining this wonderful relationship with my aunt as my son, and I continue to live peacefully.
Well, thanks for your long service as a housekeeper. We don't need a caregiver anymore, so we're getting a divorce today. I had been caring for my father-in-law for 15 years, stepping in for my husband and mother-in-law. Just after my father-in-law passed away suddenly, my husband, who rarely came home, appeared with his mistress. Despite the recent conclusion of the funeral, he told me in a joking tone with a smirk on his face and then thrust a divorce paper at me. Thanks for everything, old hag. I'll be expecting the compensation. Laughing derisively, the mistress standing behind my husband also looked down on me. Yes, after all my dedication over 15 years, this is your true face. I smirked inwardly as I stared intently at my husband's face, and muttered expressionlessly, "Yes, gladly." Annoyed by my attitude, Tony spat out, "What's with that attitude, Hillary?" My husband, no, this man didn't understand the situation at all. He had no idea how miserable his circumstances were going to be. My name is Hillary Irving, a 43-year-old housewife. I have been married to Tony, a company employee, for 15 years. Due to various circumstances, we have no children. Over these years, I have been constantly struggling. It was also a time of drifting apart from my husband. Tony and I met 16 years ago when I was working at a diner. I had a dream of owning my own place, and since college, I had been working part-time at this popular local diner known for its home-cooked meals, beloved by all ages. After graduating, I aimed to eventually take over the business and began working there full-time. Tony, a fresh-faced corporate worker in his second year, soon became a regular and started venting to me about his job almost every day. Talking to you, Hillary, somehow clears my mind. That's great, eat lots and do your best tomorrow. Thank you, Hillary. I initially saw Tony, 5 years younger, as a cute younger brother. As we talked more, our relationship grew closer, and about a year after we met, Tony seriously confessed his feelings. "I think I can build a warm home with you, Hillary. Please, will you marry me?" His earnest words were unlike any before, and I was unexpectedly swept off my feet. "May I think about it?" Even as I said that, my mind was half made up. Building a warm home was as important a dream to me as owning my diner. Eventually, we agreed I would continue working even after marrying, and we started our new life together. However, the dream of a happy married life with Tony was soon confronted with harsh reality. Right after the wedding, Tony announced that we would be living with his parents. His father had suffered a stroke a few years back and become bedridden, and his mother, with poor mobility, struggled with caregiving alone. Not having met them before our marriage, I was only told about this after the fact. I hesitated to live together, but Tony acted as if it was decided, leaving no room for my input, and pushed his parents' care onto me. Family should take care of family. How could I be so heartless as to send Dad to a facility or rely on strangers? But it's hard for just your mother and me to care for your father. We should at least use day services. Who's got money for that? My mom managed all this time. Now you're here, you can handle it. You're part of this family now, so stop complaining and take care of Dad and Mom. He coldly dismissed me, and from then on, Tony never listened to my objections. Half a year later, the naive and kind Tony I knew was nowhere to be found. In hindsight, from the beginning of our marriage, he had decided to treat me more like a housekeeper than a wife. But by the time I realized this, it was too late. Still, the only reason I could endure this marriage was thanks to my in-laws. From the start of our cohabitation, they were incredibly kind to me. Before becoming bedridden, my father-in-law had been a dignified executive at a major company and continued to be a man of character, always considerate of his wife and me who cared for him. I'm truly sorry to burden a young person like you, Hillary. I've told Tony many times to put me in a facility, but he won't listen. While immobile, he earnestly apologized. If only I could move more, I could make things a bit easier for you. With these kind words, my mother-in-law often dabbed at her eyes. The way they treated me sometimes reminded me of my own parents, who I lost to a car accident when I was in middle school. After their death, I bounced around relatives, living a lonely life. Wanting to create a place for myself, I pursued a dream of owning a diner. Studying business management in college with the help of student loans. Eating brought back memories of the precious days spent with my parents. My mother's delicious home-cooked meals still lived in my memory, always bringing me happiness. That's why I wanted to recreate my mother's flavors in my own diner. My parents always smiled kindly at me in my memories. The nostalgic image of my parents and the compassionate presence of my in-laws overlapped, making me feel as if they were my real parents. Tony must have his reasons, but I would prefer to stay by your side, Dad and Mom, for as long as possible. As I said this, my in-laws again cried and thanked me. Building a warm home with Tony might be difficult, but cherishing my in-laws could compensate for that. With this in mind, I gave up on my dream of the diner, quit my job, and dedicated myself to home life. 15 years passed. Life wasn't easy. Within a year of our marriage, Tony rarely came home, leaving mostly just the three of us, my in-laws and me. Tony restricted my activities and gave me only the bare minimum for living expenses. You're a housewife, so you don't need much money. Be grateful I'm providing for you. Each time, he spitefully tossed me a small amount of money. Of course, what Tony gave was not enough to live on, so I dipped into my savings from before I was married. Hillary, this is for you. One day, after years of such a life, my mother-in-law quietly handed me a substantial amount of money. Mom, I can't accept this. She smiled kindly and gently pushed an envelope filled with money toward me. It's all right. You always cook such delicious meals for us. My husband is very happy with your cooking. It's very comforting. Her words and gentle smile filled my heart with joy. My father-in-law's condition had worsened over the years, and he couldn't swallow normal food anymore. So, I had been carefully preparing meals that he could eat. Yet, when Tony occasionally came home, he would always complain about my cooking. Hey, how can you serve such lousy food with a straight face? Your cooking really sucks. Are you kidding me? Laughing foolishly at his own rude words, Tony's behavior was trivial to me. I sighed quietly to myself. Wouldn't it be better to at least look at your father's face instead? Shut up. Don't tell me what to do. Eventually, Tony left the house with a sulky look on his face, perhaps unhappy that I gave no response. This behavior repeated several times, and Tony increasingly stayed away from home. Meanwhile, my father-in-law, weakened by illness, started to be frequently hospitalized. However, there was a bit of good news. My mother-in-law managed to walk almost normally thanks to her diligent rehabilitation. But probably, Tony hadn't noticed this because he remained indifferent towards his own parents. One night, unusually, Tony came home late. He entered the house with loud, stumbling footsteps, appearing to be very drunk. Hey, the master is back, and you're not even here to greet me. What a privileged housekeeper you are. Tony, not bothering to hide his true feelings, was shouting insults loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Get the bath ready. As usual, you're a housekeeper who can't anticipate needs. No sooner had he shouted this than he sprawled out on the living room sofa and began to snore loudly. I turned around to heat the bath as instructed. Just then, a familiar electronic sound hit my back. I quickly turned around and saw Tony's smartphone. The screen lit up for a moment, displaying a message adorned with the name Claire and heart emojis. I gasped involuntarily. The message read, "The trip to Hawaii was so fun. Thanks for all the bags." Then, the smartphone screen went dark again. I stood there, frozen, staring at it. Feelings of disbelief and resignation washed over me alternately. Tony was having an affair. How long had it been? Why? Such questions and emotions mixed inside me, and I instinctively covered my face with my hands. As I staggered back to my room, I noticed my mother-in-law peeking out of her room. But I said nothing and silently returned to my room. The next day, Tony was once again gone from the house before I knew it. I thought I had heard shouting earlier, but I ignored it and sat blankly. After a while, my mother-in-law hesitantly called out from outside the room. "Hillary, something happened last night, didn't it?" When she asked me directly, I burst out crying loudly. Rushing into my room, my mother-in-law hugged me. Feeling her warmth, the reality of last night hit me, and I told her loudly about what I had seen. Dark emotions kept rising in me, and I couldn't keep my voice down. While hugging me, my mother-in-law kept apologizing tearfully. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Hillary." After a while, I calmed down considerably. "Hillary, you know, I've been thinking." She started to tell me about a plan she had. Just then, a loud thud came from my father-in-law's room downstairs. We hurried down to him. It seemed he had heard my loud voice. With a pale face, he apologized to me repeatedly. Seeing him in pain, I quickly called an ambulance. However, a few days after being taken to the hospital, my father-in-law passed away. Grieving, we managed to arrange his funeral. "Dad, why did you have to die?" Tony showed up at the funeral and dramatically wailed in front of the coffin. Staring blankly, I wondered what he was even saying now. As Tony cried excessively, funeral staff and a few male relatives eventually had to carry him away. After Tony was taken away, my mother-in-law and I quietly said our goodbyes to my father-in-law. Everything felt like it had ended in an instant, and I felt an overwhelming emptiness. No more tears came. Then, Tony reappeared in front of us with a young woman. In flashy attire, surely his mistress, Claire. Smirking, Tony handed me the divorce papers. "Well, thanks for your long service as a housekeeper. We don't need a caregiver anymore, so we're getting a divorce today." "Tony, what are you doing?" Ignoring his mother's angry outburst, Tony arrogantly continued. "You were just a housekeeper after all, so no compensation. I've been supporting you all this time. I could even demand compensation from you." Be grateful, he said, smirking, while Claire grimaced behind him, which surprised me. What are you even saying? I thought. That's the deal, Mom. I'll be going home with Claire from now on. Take care. Then, turning to me with a grin, Tony said. So, get that divorce paper filed. Hearing the all too predictable words, I couldn't help but snort. Yes, gladly. And with that, I turned on my heel and headed to the office. Everything was going so smoothly, it was almost scary. With that thought, I submitted the divorce papers. Feeling as if a 15-year burden was being lifted, I walked away light-footedly. Feeling lighter in both body and spirit, I started walking away cheerfully. Then, suddenly, Claire appeared. With a furious red face, she threw some words at me. I laughed silently at the thoughtless mistress in front of me, and executed another plan I had prepared. A week later, I visited my in-laws' house with someone. As I had informed them by phone beforehand, my mother-in-law smoothly opened the door. We headed straight to the living room, where Tony, seeing me, exclaimed in surprise. Hey, why are you here? Because I invited her here. My mother-in-law said sharply. First, about father's estate. As my mother-in-law spoke, Tony leaned forward eagerly. Before he could speak, the man seated next to me placed a stack of documents on the table and solemnly announced. Father had entrusted us with his will during his lifetime. This is who I am, the man said, offering Tony a business card. A lawyer. Yes, the lawyer nodded, unfolding a document. This is the will left by your father. It stated that the property was to be divided equally. Then my mother-in-law pulled out a passbook, opened it to the last page, and placed it on the table. This is the only property left by your father. The balance showed just a few dollars. Tony, seeing this, was shocked. What is this? He grabbed the passbook and examined it from end to end. Your father needed care for 15 years. There's no way any savings would have remained. At his mother-in-law's words, Tony's shoulders slumped dejectedly. I then pressed him further. Next, about my compensation. Hearing the word compensation, Tony suddenly looked up, his eyes bloodshot and breathing heavily. You said you didn't need compensation, right? I never agreed to that. Where's the proof? Tony, at a loss for words, watched as I took out my smartphone. I opened an app and played a recording. Compensation is indeed necessary. Claire's voice could be heard saying. Indeed, when I had gone to file the divorce papers, Claire had spoken to me like that. I turned to the lawyer next to me. Will this serve as evidence? As for evidence, during the marriage, the husband had an inappropriate relationship with another woman. So the wife fully has the right to demand compensation. The lawyer responded seriously with a slight frown. At this, Claire raised her voice in surprise. But, at that time, Tony said he could claim compensation because he supported her. At this, the lawyer let out a large sigh and stared directly at Claire, stating firmly, support during the marriage is the husband's duty. Neglecting this can indeed be grounds for divorce, and can lead to compensation obligations. Furthermore, the lawyer paused, taking a deep breath, and looked sharply at Claire again. As a mistress, you too could be liable for compensation claims by the wife. In essence, both Tony and Claire must pay compensation to Hillary. Caught off guard by the lawyer's businesslike tone, Claire was momentarily speechless. However, regaining her composure, she turned to Tony and snapped. Tony, you liar. You said we'd get a lot of money. I didn't know either. While we all sighed deeply, thinking how could he not know? In any case, we will be proceeding with the compensation claim. Please arrange for the payment promptly. Clearing his throat, the lawyer addressed them in a slightly pressured tone. Thanks to that, I managed to receive a somewhat generous compensation. 3 months after divorcing Tony, I was busy living alone in a town slightly removed from my in-laws. There were many things to prepare, and my days were hectic. One day, out of the blue, Tony called. "Hey, help me out. Something terrible has happened." It seemed that the last strategy we had set up was finally taking effect. Smiling inwardly, I asked my ex-husband in a solemn tone, "What happened? Is something wrong?" "It's my mom, she's acting strange." "Understood. I'll head to your mother's house right away." When I arrived at my in-laws' house after a long time, it was in a terrible state. The kitchen and dining room were particularly bad, with unwashed dishes left for days and garbage strewn about, emitting a foul odor. My mother-in-law was sitting dazed in her room, muttering something under her breath. The appalling condition made me bite my lip hard. Seeing my solemn expression, Tony frowned deeply and murmured weakly, "After you left, Mom's condition got worse. She started to act violently and didn't recognize me anymore. When I took her to the hospital, they said it might be dementia." Hearing this, I frowned even more. Tony must have initially tried to care for his mother himself, probably pushing most of the responsibility onto Claire, just as he had dumped his father's caregiving on me. Then Claire said she couldn't handle the caregiving, and suggested putting her in a facility. Tony apparently has started to look for a facility without opposing Claire. Mom used to say she saved a lot of money, so when I looked for her bank book, I found lots of stock certificates instead. And when I finally found the bank book, there was almost nothing left. Tony said, ruffling his hair and spitting out the words, "Damn, this wasn't supposed to happen." Claire ran off with my bank book as soon as she found out there was no money left. Listening to Tony, I sighed deeply. He really was a despicable man through and through. Breaking up with him was definitely the right decision. How Tony interpreted my sigh, I wasn't sure, but he looked at me pleadingly. "Please, Hillary. Help me out." I closed my eyes, blocking out any more of Tony's sight. I didn't want to see his face for another second. I quickly finished what I had to do and prepared to take my mother-in-law from there. "I'll take care of your mother." Tony, seizing on my words, shouted, "Really?" I cut him off sharply. "But on one condition. You must never show your face to us again." "Agreed?" I glared at Tony with all my might. Perhaps overwhelmed by my intensity, Tony stumbled back a bit. A takeaway box crunched under his feet. Shortly after, I left the house with my mother-in-law, who quietly walked beside me, her steps surprisingly firm. I squeezed her hand tightly. That was some acting. Mom too. We both chuckled quietly. Yes, this had all been a plan orchestrated by my mother-in-law. Of course, she hadn't developed dementia nor had she squandered her assets on stocks. It was all an act to escape from Tony. The state of the house, however, had been quite terrible. Wasn't that a bit too much? Then she replied with a refined smile. It was a good lesson for Tony. He got what he deserved. On the night Tony's affair was exposed, my mother-in-law, while hugging me, had firmly said she would sever ties with Tony. She then suggested that we formalize our relationship through adoption. And from then, she informed me of this plan. Believing in the success of her strategy, I had been preparing and waiting. Now, we would live peacefully, just the two of us. 3 years have passed since then. I heard through the grapevine that Tony and Claire had eventually split up. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link, they say. Well, it was an inevitable outcome. With financial support from my mother-in-law, I started a diner. It is now thriving, and every day is bustling with activity. Recently, Tony showed up at my diner, looking much older than his years. Despite being 5 years younger than me. "Hey, it seems you're doing pretty well. Lend me some money," he said in a servile tone. "Your mother's funeral you didn't attend, did you? I gave you one last courtesy by informing you." Indeed, my mother-in-law passed away not long after that incident. Even if for a brief period, we had managed the diner together as a real family. Those days had become a precious memory for me. At my words, Tony's face contorted, but before he could speak, the regulars at the diner, all fans of my mother-in-law, started shouting angrily at him. In no time, they had kicked him out of the diner. He began shouting loudly outside. I approached Tony and presented him with a restraining order we had signed. When I took my mother-in-law into my care. "You haven't forgotten this, have you? I'll call the police." With a short scream, Tony fled and never returned to the diner again. Marriage? I'd had enough. While occasionally receiving proposals from regulars, I gently declined. Continuing to run my dream diner, cherishing my memories with my mother-in-law.
Oh, funeral preparations are tough, and my wife is so useless. What am I going to do? Really, it is tough, isn't it? What did she come here as a wife for? That day was my father-in-law's funeral. My husband and mother-in-law had not helped with any preparations and had left everything to me. However, as relatives began to gather, they slandered me, claiming all the work as their own achievement. Moreover, my husband's unbelievable actions continued even further. "Hey, why are you trying to take out the condolence money?" I couldn't help but reprimand him for his unreasonable behavior, to which he responded, "Shut up. It's none of your business. You're not family or anything, so don't butt in." "What do you mean I'm not family? We are married. Tom and I got married 13 years ago. At that time, Tom, his parents, and our 3-year-old son were all kind to me. That's why I wanted to support him after marrying. However, after getting married, the 4 of us changed completely. Tom became extremely bossy. He decided on his own to live with his parents, who treated me like a maid and bullied me. Even my son, influenced by his father and grandparents, began to ridicule me. I endured such a life for 13 years. During my father-in-law's funeral, I was shocked by my husband's words and reached my limit. I did not attend the funeral and left a divorce paper, disappearing in front of them. The following day, there were as many as 203 missed calls from Tom. Listening to the messages in disbelief, I heard him panicking. "Hey, where are you now?" Then, I called my husband and began to fight back. "I am Hillary, a 40-year-old housewife, working part-time at a nearby supermarket. My husband, Tom, works for a travel agency, and he has a son, Ryan, from a previous marriage. I married him 13 years ago. At that time, I wanted to support him as he was raising his 3-year-old son alone. Before marriage, I worked at a travel agency. 14 years ago, a male employee joined the company through mid-career recruitment. I'll be under your care from today. I look forward to working with you all. That man would later become my husband, but at the time, he seemed like a very refreshing man. Hillary, I heard from others that you are well versed in this job. Can you teach me? Of course, I'd be happy to. When you change jobs, the way things are done changes too, and I imagine that can be confusing. However, Tom was proactive in asking questions and worked hard to learn the job. Hillary, I'm free right now, so I'll take care of this task. Really? Thank you. That's a big help. Tom approached his job with a serious attitude, so he learned quickly. As he became proficient, his work speed increased, and he was able to help me with my tasks, which made me feel reassured about his reliability. Wow, Tom, you're raising a child on your own and working hard too? Isn't it tough? But I have to protect Ryan as a parent. I need to fulfill my responsibilities. You're kind, but make sure not to overdo it, okay? As he became accustomed to the work, we started having conversations beyond that, and I learned that he was a hard-working single father. Next holiday, I'm taking Ryan to the park. Hillary, would you like to join us? It'd give Ryan a taste of what having a mother might be like. Are you sure I'm okay for that? Absolutely. I think you're the best for it. If you say so, I'm happy to join. While we couldn't date alone because of his child, we deepened our relationship by going out together on holidays and having meals at his home. The food Mom makes is delicious. Oh, but calling me Mom makes me blush. I'm not your mom yet. Why don't you become his mom? I think Ryan needs a mother. Are you serious? While the three of us had a good time, Tom's words might have come out in such a natural way. Although it was a surprise to me, I was genuinely happy since I hoped that was the case. With pleasure, if it's okay with you. Thus, I decided to marry him and become Ryan's mother. This was 1 year after Tom joined the company. And upon marriage, I quit the travel agency to focus on home life. My parents had already died in an accident, and I had an older brother. At that time, my brother had already started his own business and was living abroad, so I couldn't tell him in person and informed him over the phone. You've met a good person. That's great. You definitely must be happy. Yeah, thank you. My brother gladly gave his blessings, and I was happy. After reporting to my brother, it was time to inform my in-laws, which was nerve-wracking, but Tom was reassuring. Don't be so nervous. They'll definitely accept you since I chose you. That makes me feel more confident. We entered my in-laws' home, and I met them face to face. I'm Hillary. I married Tom. Nice to meet you. Hello, Hillary. It's a relief you married our son. I have been thinking it's tough raising a child with only a father. Thank you so much. I was happy because my in-laws accepted the marriage smoothly, as Tom had said. I'm happy to be with Mom forever now. Ryan said that, smiling innocently. Thus, I ended up with kind in-laws, a husband, and a sweet son. Looking back, that might have been the happiest moment for me. I was certain that a happy married life awaited me. But what awaited me was an unexpected turn of events. My husband, who had previously been kind, suddenly changed. Hey, make sure you iron my shirts by tomorrow morning. Okay, I understand. Also, I'll be home by 7 p.m. tomorrow, so make sure that freshly made dinner is ready. He started to act like a lord of the house, giving orders more frequently. I thought, do men change after getting married? While I thought I could still endure this level of change, one day, my husband said something outrageous. Hey, I've just arranged for us to live with my parents. What? I wasn't informed about living together. Why should I need your permission? I'm the head of the family. Do you understand? I do, but suddenly, he had even decided that we would live with his parents. I was confused and returned his words, but his arrogant attitude left no room for rebuttal. Besides, Ryan is happy about living with his grandparents, so you can't disregard his feelings. When he mentioned our son, I couldn't argue back, and I reluctantly accepted living with my in-laws. But it wasn't just my husband who had changed. My in-laws were the same. Since Hillary is living with us, you can take it easy now. Yes, I'll do that. Hillary, I'm leaving the household chores to you. Yes, I understand. I thought I would be sharing household duties with my mother-in-law, but instead, all chores were assigned to me. As long as you live here, you must listen to us. If you defy us, we'll tell Tom. Whatever you say, Tom will always believe us, you know. Under this pressure, I struggled with the household duties. What's with this seasoning? Have you been serving this to Tom and Ryan all this time? But both of them have never complained about the taste before. They were just being considerate of you. You should realize that. Criticism of my household duties wasn't limited to cooking. What's with this way of folding clothes? And look, there's still dust here. Did you really clean? I did clean as best as I could. No matter what I did, it was never good enough, and I lived under constant criticism, being bullied as an incompetent wife for 13 years. During that time, my mother-in-law never helped with the chores even once. Saying I was treated like a maid would not be an exaggeration. Unable to endure such a life, I thought about divorce several times. However, what kept me from it was my son. I thought, I must fulfill my role as a parent until Ryan becomes an adult. That thought kept me from divorcing, despite the endurance. However, I was painfully aware of the bad influence my husband and in-laws' attitudes had on my son when an incident occurred. Why can't mom do anything right? What? Ryan, what's suddenly gotten into you? Grandpa and Grandma said so. It's really pathetic. You should be more responsible as a parent. Ryan, how can you say such things to your parent? I couldn't believe that my once sincere and adorable son could say such things. I was not only shocked by his change, but also I was already dealing with another issue at that time, which was the health of my father-in-law. In fact, a few years ago, my father-in-law became ill and needed care. Hey, I'm the head of the family, and mom is getting old. You know what to do about dad, right? Are you implying that? Exactly that. You take care of him. But I'm already busy with part-time work and household chores. Can't you help a little? However, Tom responded angrily. Shut up. Don't argue with me. I'm the one earning the money that keeps us living. I thought, that's a terrible thing to say. I thought it was useless to say anything more. My husband's attitude was the worst. With this background, I continued my life juggling part-time work, household chores, and caregiving alone. As a result, my body became worn out, and I lost even the energy and margin to think about divorcing. Then, my father-in-law fell ill again and passed away. Oh, funeral preparations are tough. Hey, Hillary, you take care of everything. Yes, as a daughter-in-law, it's only natural for you to do that. Understood. I had a feeling it would turn out this way, but sure enough, my husband and mother-in-law left all the funeral preparations to me. What was worse was what happened next. When the relatives who attended expressed their condolences for the sudden loss, they praised my husband and mother-in-law for managing the funeral, and the two acted as if they had handled all the arrangements. Well, it couldn't be helped, but I didn't think arranging a funeral would be so hard. Yes, it was a big help that Tom worked together with me. While some voices did commend me as a good daughter-in-law, the two slandered and mocked me. Oh, that one is no good. She's a useless wife who can't even handle this. She could at least be useful at a time like this. Hearing and seeing that, even the relatives were appalled. I thought, why have I tried so hard up to this point? Despite having devotedly served my husband and mother-in-law as they demanded, it was all unrewarded. I was truly disgusted with the situation. My husband's shocking behavior continued. Tom, what are you doing? What? Don't raise your voice. It's annoying. It's not just annoying. Why are you trying to take out the condolence money? I never thought he would do something so unreasonable. While I was stunned, I couldn't ignore such behavior, so I had to call him out. Shut up. It's none of your business, so stay out of it. You're not family, so don't interfere. What do you mean I'm not family? We're married. I couldn't believe what he said. I had been treated like a maid by my in-laws, but to think that my husband also saw me that way, despite being his wife, which means I am family, the fact that he didn't recognize that was shocking. So you say such things. I've had enough. At this point, continuing to endure seemed foolish, so I decided not to attend my father-in-law's funeral and returned home. I packed my bags, left a divorce paper, and went to a certain person's place. The following day, I checked my phone and thought, wow, what is this? I saw a history of missed calls from my husband. There were as many as 203. Not only had he left a history of calls, but also messages. As I listened, shocked, I heard, "Hey, Hillary, where the heck are you?" His voice sounded frantic and panicky. "The funeral is about to start. It's bad. Come back quickly." Despite his previous arrogance, it seemed he couldn't manage anything without me. Reluctantly, I called my husband, who seemed to have been waiting so eagerly. He picked up the phone promptly. "Finally, you decided to call. Hey, why didn't you attend the funeral?" "Why? You should ask yourself that. You're insolent for a wife. I won't forgive you for embarrassing me. Wasn't it fine without me? My brother attended in my place. Indeed, My brother had attended the funeral in my place. As I mentioned this, my husband became even more flustered. That was the problem. You must have badmouthed us to your brother. Not at all. I only spoke the truth. I knew it, and your brother discussed it in front of the relatives. Thanks to that, both Mom and I were reproached by everyone. That's your own doing. If the relatives had any sense, they would naturally be upset knowing what my husband and mother-in-law had done. I really can't understand why they don't see that. Not only had they caused a commotion at the funeral, but what added insult to injury was what happened after they returned. When we got back from the funeral, there was a divorce paper. Are you serious about this? Yes, I'm serious. Of course. I answered clearly, showing my strong intention to divorce. Don't joke. I will never allow a divorce. You just need to shut up and listen to me. Even after all this, he said such things. It felt like he was completely oblivious to the reasons for the divorce and truly beyond help. I'm done being at the mercy of you and your mother. I won't be coming back. What did you say? Make sure to fill out the divorce papers properly. Bye. I firmly told my husband this and hung up the phone. A week passed. There had been no contact from my husband, and I had been living peacefully when suddenly my mother-in-law called. Hillary, what on earth is going on? Mother, what brings you to call all of a sudden? It's not all of a sudden. Why do we have to be kicked out of the house? Oh, is that what this is about? What do you mean by that? Her call was to find out why they had been kicked out of the house. But there was a reason I could stay calm. Because that house originally belonged to my parents, and now it's under my brother's name. What are you talking about? In fact, the house we had been living in was one my brother had lent to me. My husband and in-laws had misunderstood, thinking it was a house that I had inherited from my parents. That's why they thought they could live there, as if it was their own. This situation dates back to when my father-in-law died. When I informed my brother about the funeral, he was still abroad. But when I mentioned the funeral, he said he would come back and attend. We met for the first time in years before the funeral. Hillary, are you okay? You look so worn out. What happened? Well, actually, it had been years since I had seen my brother, but he was shocked at how different I looked. Concerned, he approached me, and I honestly explained everything that had happened. What a thing to say. I won't forgive anyone who hurts my dear sister. His expression was stern, and he clenched his fists, shaking with anger. Hillary, don't worry. I'll take care of it. Thank you. Thus, with my brother's support, I was able to firm up my decision to divorce my husband. Now, get back to the present. I was talking with my mother-in-law on the phone, and I decided to reveal a certain fact. I've decided to live near my brother from now on. What? As I said this, my mother-in-law sounded shocked. It seemed that Tom was nearby, and taking over from the silent mother-in-law, he spoke up. Hillary, don't say things like that. Let's start over. I'm reflecting on it all. What are you saying all of a sudden? It's absurd. I can't even consider getting back together with you. I'm serious. I'm your husband, after all. Can't you trust what your husband says? What made him think he could be trusted after all the trust-destroying actions he had taken? Moreover, the situation had changed since before, and I decided to tell him about it. Listen, Tom. Another reason it's impossible to get back together is that I'm not in the US right now. What? What do you mean? As I spoke coldly, Tom anxiously asked for clarification. Do you think my brother is permanently back in the US to live? Isn't that what it means when you say you're going to live near your brother? He had interpreted it that way, thinking according to his convenience without being told anything. I was really astonished at his way of thinking. I've changed my nationality and moved to Cancun. Huh? You moved to Cancun? Yes, that's right. My brother is in the US only temporarily. He didn't come back to live here permanently. No way. As I spoke, Tom sounded surprised and shocked. There was no longer any reason to continue the conversation with him. I decided to tell him one last thing. Right now, my brother is staying in the US to handle various procedures, so please ask him about anything else. After saying that, I ended the conversation and hung up. Later, I was able to hear from my brother about Tom. He did enough to deserve a divorce, yet he hesitated to sign the divorce papers. I wondered how stubborn he could be. Really? But in the end, did he sign the divorce papers? He wouldn't have signed them if it were just up to me to convince him. I had no choice but to involve a lawyer. The lawyer you hired was very competent, wasn't he? That makes me feel relieved. As I asked, my brother nodded and told me that everything had smoothly progressed, with the divorce papers signed. Then my brother sold our family home. When asked where the three of them ended up after losing their home, the response was like this. After I sold the family home, they had nowhere to live. Now, they're living in a rundown apartment, all three of them. Wow, that's tragic, but it's really just a case of reaping what they sowed. While it seemed tragic to hear about their situation, there was no room for sympathy. If they had remained as kind as they were before the marriage, things would not have ended this way. Ryan could have grown up properly too. It's too late to say such things now, but it's good that you had been recording videos on your smartphone and writing diaries. I really wished they would have reformed without my having to do such things. But maybe they would never have changed regardless. At least, that's what I think. After all, they have caused you so much suffering. What you did was hardly a punishment. True to my brother's words, I had been writing in a diary and secretly recording videos on my smartphone about the things my husband and in-laws did to me. When I submitted these as evidence to the lawyer, they were acknowledged as powerful evidence. As a result, I succeeded in obtaining compensation from my husband and mother-in-law. After that, peaceful days returned to me. I have started working again at a travel agency in Cancun, introduced by my brother. I endured a lot of hardships in the past, but from now on, I want to cherish myself more and lead a joyful and happy life.
My sister is getting married? I don't care. The younger sister's comment sparked laughter from both our parents. You're ugly and a failure, you know? Really? It's pitiful that someone like you would be anyone's wife. Feeling something cool inside me as the three of them laughed. I realized just how much they disregarded me. I never had any expectations, but to be treated with such disdain. Do they really not care about me at all? Well, fine. If that's how they feel, I won't hold back either. The time had come to right all the wrongs I had suffered from my family. Ready to leave everything behind, I started taking action. My name is Kelly Morris, and I'm 30 years old. I work for a big tech. I have one troubling issue, my family. I have a father, a mother, and a younger sister, and frankly, our relationship is not good. I'm the only one who is excluded in the family. This didn't just start recently. My parents adored my sister Mandy, not me. Despite her being my only sister, I couldn't help but despise her. Mandy was born when I was 2. I don't remember much from that time. But I do remember how happy my parents were when she was born. Naturally, that's a normal reaction for parents. But what I couldn't understand was their behavior afterward. After Mandy's birth, my parents completely ignored me. Yet, whenever Mandy called them, they'd rush to her side. Eventually, I became a nuisance to my parents. You're ugly compared to Mandy, our child, yet you have nothing good about you. And other hurtful words were hurled at me. I was young then and didn't fully understand, but as I grew older, I gained knowledge and began to understand what they meant. Desperate for their approval, I threw myself into my studies and sports. As a result, I advanced to national competitions with my badminton club and was accepted into a prestigious high school. I went straight into one of the nation's top universities, and after that, I was active in university clubs and got a job at a big tech. I've tried desperately hard, yet my parents have never once praised me. Contrary to me, my sister Mandy always liked to compare things. When I secured my job, she spoke mockingly. You think working at a good company is everything, don't you? It's not like that. I think various experiences are necessary. And that's why I was active in clubs during university. You don't get it for women, it's all about looks and style. You've never participated in a beauty pageant like I did at university, have you? Sure, you are cute. But that doesn't mean everything goes your way. I gave her a bit of a lecture. She then held her stomach and laughed, ha ha ha. You're really stupid. For women, as long as you're pretty, everything else will work out. What? That's not how it works. Don't you see it at home? I'm cute, so Mom and Dad love me so much. Why would you say that? Besides, both Mandy and I are their daughters. It's really funny how different we are as their daughters. Thanks to you, my self-esteem is through the roof. Thanks. Her words finally broke me. I had planned to commute from my parents' home after getting a job. But I couldn't stand being with my family any longer, and decided to move into the company dormitory. Since then, I haven't seen my family. If they contact me, I plan to respond. But there has been no apology from Mandy, and no messages from my parents. Normally, when their child gets a job and moves away, they would check in. How are you doing, or how's work? But even after 7 years, there's no contact from them. It's clear they are not interested in me. Despite everything, I'm currently engaged to a man. He is Steve Thompson, a senior colleague at my company. Steve was my mentor when I joined the company and supported me at work. Initially, we were just senior and junior colleagues, but 3 years ago, we started working on the same project and our relationship progressed. Our distance closed, and I began to see him not just as a senior colleague, but with romantic feelings. It seems he felt the same. One day, about 6 months after I started having feelings for him. Steve expressed his feelings for me. Ms. Morris is no, Kelly. The time I spend with you really makes me happy. So, would you go out with me? Mr. Thompson. Please stop calling me Mr. From now on, I'd like you to call me by my first name. Can I call you Kelly too? Of course. Please let me call you Steve when it's just the two of us. Ah, gladly. Looking forward to our future together. Yes. I look forward to it too. And so, I started dating the man I loved. 2 years later, Steve finally proposed. Of course, I happily accepted, and that's how we got engaged. I want to marry the person I love and share countless happy moments together. I never doubted that we could be happy together. Since we were going to get married, I had to properly inform my family at least once. I decided to discuss this with Steve. Hey Steve. I've told you about my family, right? So, I'm debating whether to tell them about our wedding date. It's tough. Since we couldn't even greet them for the engagement, I would like them to at least attend the ceremony. That's what I thought. As he said, my family had already once refused to meet. Not just me, but Steve and I. When Steve proposed, he wanted to greet my family. However, both my parents and my sister firmly refused. We're not so idle as to spend time on such things, they dismissed it, and that was that. No matter how bad my memories with my family are, I at least want them to attend my once-in-a-lifetime wedding. I decided to first try calling my sister. As I hesitated to press the call button, staring at the screen, Steve spoke up, Huh? What's up? That icon, is that your sister? Yeah, that's right. Her name is Mandy. Unlike me, she's cute. Oh, right. Mandy. Wow, what a coincidence. Watching Steve get excited on his own, I was puzzled and asked, What do you mean? He explained with a smile. Actually, there's a junior I was close with in college. I've invited him to the wedding, and I just met him recently. And he showed me a picture of his girlfriend. What? Could it be that was Mandy? Yeah. Crazy coincidence, right? But maybe it's a different person. According to the junior, she's a good, family-oriented girl with a great personality. And I think he said she's an only child. It seems Mandy has hidden my existence and posed as an only child. While I was genuinely shocked, it wasn't surprising coming from her. Therefore, I decided to keep the fact that I am Mandy's sister a secret from that junior until the day of the ceremony. Meanwhile, I also had to visit my parents about the wedding. A week later, I was in my hometown for the first time in about 7 years, hurrying to my parents' house with heavy steps. The regret came immediately after I arrived at the house. My sister began insulting me the moment she saw my face, without any sign of surprise. Huh, big sis, what are you doing here? Did you run out of money and come to mooch off mom and dad? That's not it. I came because there's something important. Something important? Like declaring disownment? That would be hilarious. At my sister's words, even our father and mother began to laugh out loud. Over their laughter, I spoke clearly. I'm getting married. The ceremony is on the 30th next month, and I came to inform you about it. With that, the room fell silent. Then my sister burst out laughing. Big sis getting married? I really couldn't care less. Wait a minute, it's a family wedding after all. By the way, the whole family is going to Hawaii that day. so we'll be absent from your wedding. The whole family. What about me? If I can't attend the ceremony, at least let my fiancé greet you. What? That's a waste of time, right? Mom and Dad think so too, don't they? Following my sister's remarks, my father and mother began to laugh as well. You're ugly and a failure, you know? Really? It's pitiful that someone like you would be anyone's wife. As the three of them laughed loudly, I felt something inside me cool and detach. I hadn't expected much from the beginning, but to be disregarded to this extent. Do they really not care about me at all? Well, fine. If that's how they feel, I won't hold back either. Turning my back on them as they mocked me, I simply said, "Understood," and left my family home. It had been 7 years since I last visited, yet my stay lasted only about 10 minutes. I hadn't anticipated such outright denial of my existence. But this only strengthened my resolve. I would make them regret casting me aside. Afterward, I asked Steve for help and steadily prepared for my revenge. To keep it from my family, I secretly informed my relatives about the wedding date and arranged for them to attend. Thus came the day of the wedding, a day prepared with revenge in mind. As a crowd of guests gathered at the venue, Steve, his parents, and I lined up in the reception hall. The hall began to buzz, and relatives asked, "Where are Mandy and her family?" Answering their questions, I took the microphone and began to speak slowly. Thank you all for gathering here today for us. As you can see, my family is not present. I would like to discuss the reasons for this. I then confessed openly about my circumstances, how my family treated me over the years, and how they had refused to acknowledge my marriage or attend the ceremony, revealing everything. My family despised and looked down on me. And they didn't show their faces even on a day as special as today. So, I decided to tell all of you who know my family everything about them. My voice shook towards the end. Tears that I had been holding back welled up and ran down my cheeks. Steve placed his hand on my back and gently stroked it. As if a string had snapped, tears streamed down freely. After the reception, relatives apologized for not noticing sooner and expressed their intention to cut ties with my family, all asserting their support for me. After most had left, Steve, his junior colleague Keith, and I remained. Keith then spoke up softly. I had no idea that Kelly, Steve's fiancée, was Mandy's sister. I'm sorry, I didn't know anything. No, I'm the one who should apologize for surprising you. This was all to vent my own frustrations. If you still want to maintain a relationship with Mandy, I won't stop you. No. I need to think. Mandy claimed she was an only child and boasted about how much she valued family. Yet this. I'm sorry for causing you such trouble. Thank you for coming today. Despite Keith's apparent concern about Mandy, there was a refreshed look on his face. I need to think it over, he had said, but perhaps he had already made up his mind. Later, my married life with Steve began. On a holiday, as we were enjoying a relaxed day together, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed Mandy, and it was Keith making the call. As soon as I answered, my sister began to yell furiously. Don't mess with me. What did you do to Keith? So, he's told you something, has he? Did you orchestrate this? We were about to get married. And he said to me, I heard everything from your sister, I want to break up. Her breathing was rough, and she sounded utterly distraught, even through the phone. I struggled to suppress a laugh and slowly responded. Do you know why he would say that? What? So you did investigate my boyfriend and spread lies about me because you hate me? Who goes that far? That's unbelievable. You also must have said unnecessary things to the relatives. What lies? I only spoke the truth. At the wedding, I simply shared our family story. At the wedding. Yes. Since our family didn't attend, I explained to the guests why. I told them about how you all treated me, what kind of hurtful things you've said. Heath was very upset, you know? What? Why would you tell such a story? Of course it would make me look bad. That's why I told it. To make you regret how you've treated me. How cruel. I never did anything that bad to you. In her mind, the numerous insults she hurled at me weren't that bad. The fact that I shared these truths with others made me cruel, but excluding me was not? That's absurd. Before I knew it, I raised my voice in anger. Don't mess with me. I never did anything bad? How could you even say that? Do you have any idea how much you've made me suffer? My heart has been broken over and over by you. What, you? After ruining someone's love life, how dare you act so self-righteous? It's all karma. If you hadn't treated me so poorly, I wouldn't have needed to reveal anything at the wedding. And you wouldn't have been dumped by your boyfriend. Your past actions have come back to haunt you. I will never forgive you and your family. Go to hell, all of you. With that, I hung up before she could respond. And continued to ignore her calls, blocking them instead. Since then, it didn't take long for my family to fall into their own hell. Apparently, Mandy had been shouting in the office. Please reconsider. I won't break up, which led to reprimands from superiors. And cold stares from colleagues, eventually driving her to become a recluse. Even my parents faced criticism from relatives for their role in the fiasco. Becoming pariahs themselves. Having been doted on for having a beautiful daughter, they now lived a shadow of their previous lives. Only seen when my father ventured out alone to the store at night. It was all their own doing. They deserved to suffer. As for me, I was happily married to Steve. Since that day, many people have reached out to care for me. And even relatives started contacting me. Expressing my feelings and appealing to others showed that change was possible. Something I had learned firsthand. With this experience, I resolved to live honestly and openly in the future.